start of the stream, and then I'm going to email the stuff and put it in the Patreon. They did a Mike Judge episode of that podcast. It was very good.
Yeah, I bet.
There wasn't a slouch that I heard, man. There's a redundancy in their stories because, like, David Spade has 3 stories to give, and you will hear them regularly.
They want to give you.
All right, I'm gonna give this to the Kings.
They're going to come on just in time to watch me melt down.
What's happening?
It's just not, it's not connecting.
What's going, guys? We are going to be doing a shoot interview with Mike Allred today. So let me post that in the chat. So if you have any Allred questions, put them in the chat.
First book we're going to look at is the Batman Hush coloring book. So you get to see some of Jim Lee and Scott Williams' art without any coloring over top of it. There's a lot of it.
You know what the question will be is go onto your phone into the like make sure you're paid up. You know what I mean? I think it'll be the top, like in here, and then yeah. What's it say?
Renews December 29th.
Yeah, so you're in. Let me see if mine works, because, like, I wonder if they're trying to jack us and maybe you gotta buy something else now. Let's see. I'm in on mine.
This doesn't make sense. That's yours. 15. The 15 is your phone is showing up.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead. Are you in airplane mode or something?
I did put it on airplane mode, but I wasn't to start with.
It's the iPad that's being weird.
Why do you think that?
Here, like, you know what we'll do now is I'm gonna connect and just see if.
Because I got your phone on the iPad too.
Yeah, no, it's your phone.
Got your phone on it too.
Yeah, but I'm in my filmmaking. I'm not picking up your phone. Like, I should be picking up your phone, I think. Did you restart your phone?
Yeah.
Yeah. Is your internet and stuff on with this?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like. Yeah, it's on.
Come on.
Maybe it's this. me see what it is on my shit. So funny, man. Like they could have just sold this as a black and white trade. But that was the era.
They probably have that too. They probably have a noir. Don't you think?
Yeah, everybody was asking about the app we use, man. And I guess Chunky isn't in the App Store any longer. It was too good.
It's not too good for me. It's a fucking nightmare on my end.
Chunky. Not Filmic.
But you know what? I think it's a whole operating system issue. I don't think it's Chunky, because when I send books over, I have the same issue with them at times. But I have a hard time opening files in Chunky now. Like I have to do it differently than I did a month ago.
This is to the Kayfabers. Yeah, like if Chunky's in the App Store, it's not for iPhone, so you got to get it for iPad.
Well, I don't know what to say or do about this. This is
Yeah, I'm looking online.
Doesn't make sense.
Okay. Alright. So, open up your Filmic on your phone. And then hit this. Go to that. You motherfucker. And then maybe it's this, and then that will be it. Hit, like, you just go into your regular, get out of it. Just get into your, let's see if this will do it. I'm gonna try by satellite. Yeah, just, nah, it's this motherfucker, man. Yeah, this is painful.
I don't know what else to do.
Yeah, well, I'll do some. I'll do some to start and just fuss with it a bit. Let me see what I have in here for device. Jimmy, can you go into your Filmic one more time real quick? Alright, I'm going to compare these pieces, go to device. Remote control. Stream optimized for. Why does it look different?
You're on satellite camera.
Okay, so you gotta be on satellite. Okay, hopefully that'll. Yep, that's what it was. That's what it was. So you can take it down now. Boom. All right. All right, guys. We're good to go. You know, Jimmy, so good that we have two things, man. So that we could like do that. All right. Need this to not be facing us. All right, we're gonna look at Wrightson's Frankenstein, and then we're gonna play a game.
Dudes are talking about there was a Spawn coloring book,
Right,
all
yeah.
McFarlane art inside, and Larson on the cover.
Yeah.
How does that happen?
Yeah. I think one of these waters is me, Jimmy.
We should have Chunky as like an endorser.
Yeah, it's like Jimmy. When it comes, did you try to use iTunes to import the stuff?
No, I just always did it the way I've done it for like 5 years.
Yeah, but when
Never
you
had a problem.
when you're doing a mass amount of stuff, it's probably
Even
better to
one
do
book.
it wide.
Even one book, I can't. It just doesn't work. It worked one way for 5 years,
Mm-hmm.
and now it doesn't work.
Yeah. Good if you are, Jimmy.
Did you lock those?
Yeah, you could do it again. Lord knows we don't want that bullshit running. Like, you know, on a video this detailed. that's what that shit would happen to. Good if you are.
Yep.
Welcome to your favorite YouTube channel, Cartoonist Kayfabe. My name is Ed Piskor.
I'm Jim Rugg.
We've been threatening to take a look at Bernie Wrightson's Frankenstein for quite a long time, Jimmy. Let's make good on that today. But first, you guys know that this is a daily YouTube channel. And if you don't know, now you do. Go on the front page of the Kayfabe YouTube channel. We have more than 1,600 videos up on the channel right now. We might have talked about some of your favorite comics. So hit the magnifying glass on the Kayfabe channel. Search for your favorite titles and check out those videos. The videos are brought to you in part by the Patreon, and the King Kayfabers on the Patreon get the videos before anybody else. They're hanging out with us in a live stream recording session as we fumble around with our equipment in order to bring these videos to you on the daily. And it's your way to mitigate the Kayfabe effect. We talk about stuff that is rare, and usually it's very accessible online until it isn't. And it's usually the King Kayfabers that snap that stuff up. So without further ado, Jimmy, let's take a look at this book by Bernie Wrightson, maybe his masterpiece, 7-8 years in the making. It was something that was talked about in every Bernie Wrightson interview from the 70s to the early 80s. And he would talk about, like, yeah, I had to put it down, or, yeah, I did a little bit of stuff in Hollywood, and I earned myself a month to work on my Frankenstein book.
Yeah, a real passion project in that regard, in that he was a commercial artist, and this was something he was doing, as you say. You get a little bit ahead, you buy yourself 3 days, you buy yourself a week. You know, I was curious what edition of this you would have. This is the edition I have. It came out in 1994 by a Pennsylvania publisher.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, and do you remember when you got it or where you got it, anything like that?
Yeah, this was just a flea market purchase, but the original version is a Marvel
Right.
publication with all of the graphic design stuff and the the typesetting by Fantagraphics, which is a interesting thing. It was licensed out to Fantagraphics to do all the real legwork.
Wow.
And I asked Gary Groth about that, and he said basically we had all the equipment. They were putting out the Comics Journal, they were doing all the typesetting and things for that, and they had the old computers that would be able to shrink and enlarge. They had all of the equipment that didn't require you to get hit with like lead linotype spurts and shit like that. So it was their deal.
I got mine like right around when this is published because it's 1994 edition, and I had it as a senior in high school. So it was 94, 95 was my senior year. I remember writing an English paper on it.
Nice.
Yeah, it's so I can't remember where I got mine. It must have been one of the early comic shops I had access to, I'm guessing. Blows my mind. And one of the differences between that Marvel edition in 83 and this edition, I think there's 3 more of his illustrations in here. I think he did about 50 overall.
Yeah.
And like 43 were in the Marvel book. I think 47 are in here. I was looking closely at this line work, as hopefully all of the Kayfabe audience will be doing as we go through this.
Right.
And it's phenomenal. It's absolutely breathtaking what he does in terms of value, where it's like just parallel lines, but they're a little bit heavier at the top. They fade. They're smooth looking. And hatching can hide a lot. That parallel inking style cannot.
Right.
Like you are really bringing it whenever you have this kind of line work. Very fine lines. But that is all my way of saying I think there's pen work here and brush work.
Oh, interesting. He did make it a point to say that the whole impetus was to use the materials that would have been available during the time that Mary Shelley was writing the book. So that was like an important aesthetic choice that he made, and it certainly looks like engravings from that day.
Should also note, and you don't need to go back to this, but a Stephen King intro, which was from the original 83 edition.
Nice.
And it's also included in this edition. There have been several of these. There have been some newer ones. I can't remember if it's IDW or Dark Horse, I think. But there have been a couple new editions of this that have come out this century. And for a while, there was a rumored artist edition of this in the works. So hopefully that will emerge at some point.
Yeah, I think Dunbier, he's consistently teasing it, and I think it's just a matter of getting access to all the pieces. He wants to make it right.
I think of like the short list of artist editions that I want to see, and it's because I imagine the art is different in person than what we see on the page. Here,
I think it's gigantic. I think it's going to be bigger than those Twice Up pages.
That may be part of the problem, is figuring out how do we actually do this, and that's perfect. That's why I want to see it. I bet there's maybe range in size from pages to pages and piece to piece, but the thing is phenomenal. Like you're going to see a lot of these glass vials as we get into Frankenstein's laboratory. It becomes like, how do you do this?
Jim, that was an Erlenmeyer flask, by the way. He sculpted this Frankenstein head. There's a video floating around. You could find it on YouTube where he is in studio talking about the creation of Frankenstein, and his sculpture is, it's just like he has that ability to do that, and he's lighting it, and that's something that you will notice, very consistent lighting.
It makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense, because also we're going to see Frankenstein's face from different angles, and it's his version of Frankenstein, so it makes sense that he would have a 3D model that he built for reference to keep that consistent.
I feel like people would like dash past this kind of thing because it doesn't have just like all that meaning, but it's so thoughtful. It's clearly snowy, bright. He's able to convey time of day.
Yes, and the longer you spend with it, the more you start to notice, like they're sitting up on this hillside overlooking this town, which is
impossible perspective.
I could take you to 20 of these. We live in a hilly location here in Pittsburgh. I can take you to 20 cemeteries like this, but it reveals itself. It's like it is half buried in snow, and you just linger on it, and you start to see these other details. And then, like, I look at this stuff, and I see missing pieces from Toddlebin. Whenever I see his inks and Swamp Things, I would always say, like, nobody inks like this.
Right.
Well, here's some examples of that, and I bet you he was well aware of this stuff. If you're an ink slinger, this is going to be a book that you have to have.
Absolutely. Look at the light in the drops.
There's some great water in this book.
Not one line out of place. Like it's all there for a purpose.
I love the idea, too, that this is his masterpiece. I don't think anybody disputes that.
Right.
And the idea that it's something that he did outside of the conditions of commercial art is kind of revealing that that this means something to the guy.
Totally. He was a part of the studio, and those guys who were part of the studio, Mike Allred, Jeffrey Catherine Jones, Barry Windsor Smith, they were the people of their era who were kind of pushing the boundaries a little bit. You know, like there was still such gatekeeping when it come to distribution and stuff like that, that they could only go so far. They didn't have access to the things that we have access to today in terms of vanity press and print on demand and the ability to distribute, to a customer directly. But they all did things, man. They had different monographs come out, and Gorblimey Press published stuff.
I see a conversation with Barry Windsor Smith in the way this grass is rendered.
Yeah.
Really great to think of those two guys as looking over each other's shoulders in terms of line work. You know, they're very distinct, but also there's some parallels. I'm sure that, they had those wordless conversations as they looked at each other's artwork.
There would be times where he allows black to be used for effects like this, but on most of the illustrations, it will be like a 90% gray, which is nature in a way. Like you get pure black in a vacuum, and very rarely are you inside of a space like that.
And if you want to do work outside of the comics field, comics are pure black and white.
Right.
So it's a chance to kind of be more nuanced than what you're getting with, especially the commercial printing at that time.
And when you look at old etchings and stuff, like there's never solid black.
Yeah, I think it used to be a major printing problem.
Mm-hmm. This book is reading Frankenstein is a revelation, especially if you only know like the Universal monsters and the other kind of film adaptations, because Frankenstein is a genius. He teaches himself to read. He is not like so by having that kind of cognitive awareness, it adds way more tragedy to the character as opposed to just making him like a lumbering brute.
Yeah, and there's talk in the intros about how Frankenstein is often a book that people pick up and put down because it is so different than, you're expecting this monster, and it's very different than the Universal Pictures version of it.
Right.
So, yeah, it's kind of this is the first version of Frankenstein I read. It's great, too, how much he gets variety in these illustrations, whether it's negative space, like when we saw that woman hanging by the tree, or motion. It's something we don't see in all of these. Sometimes they're very thoughtful and contemplative, but he's able to do all of the stuff. It's not like he's hiding some deficiency somewhere.
Right.
Which I think you've got to figure out that variety if you're going to do a series of illustrations like this.
And I think that is where the discipline of being a cartoonist really lends itself to something like this. He has experience with that. And I always joke that to be a comic book artist, it makes you a powerful illustrator, because you might have to draw a tank on one page and the Empire State Building on the next,
right? And
then Napoleon Bonaparte on the page or panel after that.
This would probably be an exercise for cartoonists to add to their recreational time, is like illustrate a novel, because you are forced to do certain things. You may learn to draw scenes and kind of break down your space a little bit differently too.
Yeah, I guess the other kind of venue at the time period that he was drawing this really was the portfolios. They existed, so maybe this was even, and maybe there was a Frankenstein portfolio. Oh, there was?
Yeah, I think 77, 78, and early 80s, I think there was one.
Yeah, that makes sense. And the portfolios would always be like this. It would be just a very, very ornate set of drawings, far different from the comics works of the people who were involved.
Right.
Look at the lines, like going with the form.
Yes.
Even to the point of like the contours of the veins.
Yeah, and you see it also on the blind, like whatever that wood front is, you can see those lines paralleling that, going back into perspective.
Very Gerhard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of Gerhard, I think, on these pages for sure. Gotta assume Gerhard's a fan. Like I say, if you're doing ink work, I think you're going to get a lot out of a book like this.
He dedicates this book to Roy Krenkel, who was one of the Flegels, the Flegel gang being some of the, the greatest tag teams in EC Comics history. It's Al Williamson, it's Frank Frazetta, it's Roy Krenkel. I think Angelo Torres did a little bit with them. And Krenkel was the background man. Krenkel was the first guy to get the paperback gigs. He introduced Frazetta to Ace Books and those other companies. And this is distinctly Krenkel-looking artwork right here, these bits.
I think it's a good example of taking somebody who Wrightson clearly holds in high esteem, but also making it his own.
Oh, absolutely. And the Wrightson stew is many EC guys.
Yeah.
So it's the Ghastly Graham Ingalls.
You know
it's
what?
Crinkle.
One of the great things in the Stephen King intro, he does one paragraph where he basically talks comic artists. And it's mostly the EC guys, as you would expect. But it's amazing to see him kind of run through a list of like this element from Reed Crandall and this element from, I guess not all EC guys, but, it's the list. It's Warren and EC is who he's pulling from in references, and it's pretty good. Interesting. This is one of the few like kind of repeating compositions.
Right. And the maniacal hay that has like light sources built in, man. He's not doing trickery with, whiteout per se, and he's drawing these individual pieces.
This is another piece that goes away. We talk a lot about how color has kind of usurped inking for value and stuff and
right.
texture, and like this is the celebration of value and texture.
Right.
And sadly, it's not even a skill that a lot of, I think, comic book artists have today because it's not used today like it used to be.
It's true. And just you understand it, like you've folded a piece of paper in quarters that way, and you know how it reacts and how the light kind of shines off. He's very, very, very observant artist.
Yeah, you wonder where his head is on some of these, like what kind of stuff he's looking at and seeing and trying to make sure that he finds, some reference or some examples of before he gets into it.
His studio space, he's got the test tubes and the flasks and
you
stuff.
You have to, because as we get into that stuff, there's just too much light. Like, I don't know how you could fake that. Man, the light stuff's amazing. We looked at Freak Show not too long ago, Bernie Wrightson comic. And if you guys are unfamiliar with that and you enjoy this Frankenstein video, highly encourage you to go check out the Freak Show video, because we talked about it being masterpiece of inking. That's what this stuff really is. Heads and shoulders above almost any example. This is one where I thought, these are pen lines, some of them. I'm not sure that the darker lines are, but I feel like the small hatch lines or pen lines, a lot of the lines on the books, I think, got to be pen lines.
Yeah, absolutely. I think most of it is pen lines. Like I'm of the mind that I think he uses pen. I don't. If he's using brush, I think it's just a spot blacks.
And here we go.
The famous piece.
Look at these beakers that you're seeing through. They're transparent glass, partially filled up with liquids. Unbelievable.
Right. And the glass, it's imperfect. You could imagine that, there are like kind of sharp edges a little bit. It's unrefined materials.
Man, even the
Paint
chains,
bucket.
little highlights on the chains. And he's doing that, you're not outlining. It's not a holding line. You're doing the shadow on the chain, and then you're doing the lit end, the metal that's gleaming white with a little bit of light from underneath it. Can you imagine doing that kind of ink and leaving that attention? And maybe there's whiteout on some of this stuff. That almost certainly must be.
Right.
But it still is a level of planning. Like, I would look at this, and in some ways, Frank Miller's Sin City, same deal of like, you've got to plan that out so that you don't have an outline around it.
It was comic professionals who first made me aware that this even existed, because I was taking my Extreme Studios talent search pages to the Comic Con with just busy amounts of line work that has no meaning for
Right.
anything other than just noodle marks. And it would be like Steve Lieber and dudes like that who would be like, go check out, if you like detail, right? Like, it's clear you like to put some business on the page. Go check out Bernie Wrightson's Warren work. Check out his Frankenstein, and that'll be an example of having lines on the page that are meaningful and make sense. Now, I mean, like, you can't sleep on the fact that he's got a body laying prone in perspective from a top-down view. That is a fucking extremely hard drawing to do, and to make it feel to make it feel solid, like it's really laying there. I remember Mobius in his later days. I don't know if it was an interview or a piece that he wrote for an article online, and he was talking about like the 5 like hardest things to draw, and like one of them was like a body laying prone.
Yeah.
There it is.
Yeah, it's amazing. The other thing to note is the amount of perspective on all of these elements in this super cluttered, busy background, because it's not like they're not all parallel, so they're not all converging at the same point in the distance.
Right.
And again, like, it's hard enough to grasp how perspective works, but then it's like, okay, but twist this table,
right,
turn this chest over, we're gonna have a barrel on this side. Impossible.
Yeah. Like what's required is, you got your horizon line somewhere, and so like this chair will have its own set of vanishing points.
Yes.
And this chair has its own set of vanishing points, but it's all sort of incumbent upon where the sort of horizon is. And that creates the clutter, because otherwise you have order.
Yes.
And that's what you see in a lot of comics is perfect order. All the cars are in the exact same direction. The one place you don't see is like, that's what Jeff Darrow brings.
Yes.
Man. Like on Hard Boiled, where like that freeway scene, those cars, they might be going in the same general direction, but they're twisted and turned a little bit.
That's a really good call. Hey, you were talking about like, maybe he does some concept work for film and buys himself a month. I feel like this is an illustration where he had cleared out 4 or 5 weeks and was like, all right, I'm going to go for it here.
One of his big sort of pieces of trepidation, and you could read it in those old interviews, if we get to the comics journals where he covers that, like it'll be super, super clear. But it's kind of like that Gary Panter, Jimbo's Inferno stuff, where he might get this much done in a month and have to put it down and go work on Ghostbusters.
Yeah.
And then come back and get back into that headspace.
That's wild. I like this conversation because I do think artists work this way.
Yeah.
And you'll hear like filmmakers will talk about it openly where it's like one for the studio, one for me. You don't hear it as much maybe with commercial artists, but I do think a lot of us do work this way.
Right.
You create like, okay, my rent's paid now for 8 months. Let me try to get my book in here.
And I could say that like, that's a mentality. Like I can't do that. I don't have that compartmentalization ability. And when you and I when we were kids, like I had to fully quit my job in order to draw comics because I could not do work and then come home and like draw comics. But you were able to, man. You would even draw comics
Honestly,
on the lunch breaks and stuff.
I don't know that I could do just one thing. It is funny to think like the wiring can be that different. But
yeah. This is one of those other pieces.
This is your cover image too. I mean, this is definitely one that everybody I think looks at and how could you not recognize this as being like extraordinary?
It's the drapery.
Oh man.
He's the first guy to like draw the veins coming across the big like carotid artery or whatever. So like that's the stuff that we were praising Will for doing, but Wrightson was the first guy to do it.
That's the thing too. Like you've got this amazing set, worthy of any film concept art you could imagine. But then you have these great two figures that are showing drama in a single image. So many plates he's spinning and doing it at a high level here.
You could see these scalpels through the Erlenmeyer flask, and they are warped.
Yeah,
by the glass. Look
It's
at that, man. I feel like
phenomenal.
that's a crack pipe.
That's funny. You also see like the highlights on the glass too. So you're playing with all kinds of depth.
Right.
Phenomenal. This is an exciting piece too. I like looking at these things that we find where it's like, oh yeah, I encountered this at this point 30 years ago or something.
Yeah.
It's probably the first time I laid eyes on this. And if anything, my appreciation just grows.
Right. It's like the more you learn, right? I remember Kim Deitch saying that he gets slower at making comics because he keeps learning more, and then there's so much more to consider. I think he's going full Peter Cushing there, by the way. That's the Hammer Frankenstein flicks.
That would make sense. Put some Easter eggs in there, entertain yourself, and honestly, man, keep those Frankenstein fans happy.
Whenever you watch those old, like, This Old House shows where they use all, like, prong and tube fucking no nails or whatever, like, you would see those, like, little wood shavings whenever they're making their fake nails and shit. And then using the line, like, to convey, like, light source.
Yeah, he does that very well. Not to be taken for granted, and especially when you have a complex scene, having those lines more or less complement each other.
He builds his human anatomy like Frazetta does. When Frazetta does his pen and ink stuff, like real chunky, like like a turkey leg.
I see a lot of the Frazetta in the hands. Like the knuckles and stuff have a lot of that, but the faces do too. And
you
then
see
like
the Graham Ingalls in that guy.
Yeah, I was gonna say there is like the supporting cast, the archetypes, and look at this for a use of black. Like again, the drama of what these previous several illustrations were compared to this, unbelievable.
So
almost a different illustrator on that page.
Compositional choices are being made here, man. You got a lot of directional devices happening. You got the black hair against the white. I mean, it's a clear focal point. Like, look at it in a thumbnail view, and that is the first place your eye is going. And all the trees and all the rocks and stuff are supporting that. These lines are pointing toward our main focal point. Just a true lesson in illustration.
Yeah, and beautiful attention to the details like background trees.
Absolutely.
Again, I imagine him like doing some drawing in nature and stuff, and then bringing it into these pages.
He in that exact video that I'm talking about, where he sculpts the face of Frankenstein, he's got a lot of natural light, like a super big window, and it's all nature behind him.
Makes perfect sense. Look at the subtlety of the gradation on the wall, because we have a light source, but it's so simple, and it's not hatching. It's just the lines are a little bit heavier or a little bit closer together as they go across distance.
Right.
Very hard.
The first thing that Bernie Wrightson probably heard after he turned this in, and the first fan saw it. So when are you gonna do Dracula?
After the release of the first portfolio,
right?
He's got 6 years to go on this project. It's amazing too, because this feels like something you would be doing as a plein air painter.
Yeah.
And then to do it in hard black and white, to do it in ink and not washes.
Yeah, that's the other thing you would talk about in that exact same video. I watch that video a million times, where he just talks about the abstraction and the expressive quality of just like making a drawing. And then he talks about like, you're seeing light bounce off my skin. There's no hard lines. Like making those choices in black ink, it's completely unforgiving. But it's a real clue into like where his mindset is.
And it's so great, all the grays, and then you get to like the ship, and it's almost the silhouette of the masses and stuff just busted and imprisoned in that ice.
Such a great piece.
Yeah, it's phenomenal from that illustration storytelling point of view.
He went to Noah's Ark at Kennywood for reference for this piece right here.
But closing it in, where it's like the guy's trapped in that bed.
Right.
And there's where you have to have your model that you're lighting. How else could you do that?
I know. It all just feels so right. And then like none of these textures get lost. It would get so muddy for anybody else. There's clearly a rope there. There's a little bit of fabric, but then there's some sort of wolf fur or something, hair. The hair doesn't get lost in the wood of the background.
Veins on the hand.
Oh yeah. And that neck, and very tubular veins. Like there's a roundness to them. And then the stuff that like you would never, in your conscious mind, like think to do, like hatching on the eyeballs. You just take for granted. Well, eyes are white, right? Nah, man, he's got full hatching on there, light sources.
I wonder how many people learn to shade eyeballs from looking at this stuff.
And by the way, like that is a skill that Graham Ingalls brought to comics. We looked at his artist edition and may have commented on that, depending on the pieces that were shown off.
Another one of the great waters.
And I feel like the one that comes from this, and maybe this one too, is one image, that gets broken up for the purposes of the book,
right?
Which you would want to have, because it's so much detail. Like you wouldn't want this to get lost in the spine.
I was reading some of the stuff that this publisher does in a couple of Virgil Finlay books.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind looking at those. And I think it might make sense, too, looking at that next to a book like this.
Yeah.
That's another guy who's doing delicate, intricate pen work and line work.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking that, like, fucking Wrightson might have had some Virgil Finlay books on his, his shelf.
That wouldn't surprise me at all.
There it is, dude. We got the official video on the record.
Yeah, just a masterpiece. And again, coming out of a place of passion as opposed to being paid to do this, I think that's pretty impressive, because it continues to be printed. Like I think there's at least 5 versions of this. One of the benefits of doing work that you own,
right,
is yes, it may outlive you. It may give you a chance to continue to present it to new audiences and new generations. And this book's been around, man. 83, the first printing. So here we are, 40 years later, 41, I suppose. And man, it looks as good as ever.
Yeah, absolutely. It's you're not topping it, and many have tried. There was the Day brothers who did their Sherlock Holmes comics for Renegade Press. Gary Gianni comes to mind with some of his works. These guys definitely inspired. Toddlebin, you mentioned him up front. Definitely inspired, but it doesn't pack the punch that this stuff does, and I think it all has to do with the sensitivity of what Wrightson's bringing to the table in terms of like the stuff that he's drawing and thinking about the forms and the lighting and making basically using all the rules that the early illustrators put forth in their works.
Yeah, it would be cool to do like the lineage of this stuff too, because you think of somebody like a Mike Mignola, who also, they have some commonalities with Universal Film Monsters and the lighting that's used there, and yet totally different in that Mignola is not doing line work compared to this, but there is that line that you could trace back into illustration, probably back all the way to etchings, and it's kind of cool to think of that as like a whole nother discipline that some artists, man, they fall into, and that's their whole career. But not everybody. Even like Guy Davis, I would put into that group that uses line a lot. So pretty interesting to think of it that way too. Not something I consider that much because that's not the direction my work goes, but it's something I admire when I see, and especially, how could you not admire this?
Absolutely, man. You good to go?
Yep.
All right, Kayfabers, we're going to play a game. And the game is, Jimmy, I'm going to even probably have you not look at the chat. Just so that people in the chat don't like say what the books are that I'm going to show you. So here's what we're going to do. And me and Jimmy got to film another intro to this in the other room after, like later. But I'm going to isolate images, like little pieces of drawings and panels, and then have Jimmy kind of explain his thought process and who he thinks drew the work. I'm choosing very stylistic people that I think he would be able to identify. Like it's not about stumping necessarily, but it's more about like how little do you have to see in order to be able to tell that like it was drawn by somebody. I think it'll be an interesting conversation, and I have 5 pulled. If it takes a while, maybe we'll just do 2, 3, something like that. If you snap them up quick, we'll do all 5. So I need you to not look.
Okay.
I'm gonna grab a couple pieces of paper to kind of isolate.
All right. I'll take a bathroom break, and I'll put this down so that I don't see chatters giving anything away.
Right.
See how good of a studio audience they are.
I don't think they would spoil it, but it could be impulsive.
Right.
I could pull up a comic.
I could see myself struggling too. You'll see sweat forming on my brow.
It's all going to be edited. None of it's meant to make you feel dumb. Not exactly. I mean, you could come in and you won't want to spoil it for yourself.
No, I don't.
It'll be too much fun. But I'm gonna have to like reset up the camera a whole bunch. So what I'm thinking of, Jimmy, is like we do the intros and stuff like in there and just kind of like launch right into things. So it might be like a 3-minute video that we have to shoot in the other room, and then this will all be like the gameplay. So just look away for a second, like fully turn away.
I will pontificate on how excited I am to talk to Mike Allred.
Yeah.
One of the things that's on my mind is he comes in the, I guess 89 or 90, but really like he's a 90s dude, in terms of when he really starts making comics that we all see. And he's a brush guy, like Paul Pope at a time whenever the brush really was out of fashion at the top of the comics making tool chain.
Right.
And, I don't hear it as much. Like we hear a lot about Paul Pope and his influence as a brush slinger. But Allred was using that brush whenever there really weren't too many people doing his style.
No, it's true. And I
always commend guys that break in doing something different.
Like I interacted with his original art like pretty early, and it was pretty unforgettable.
Yes. Yeah, he was a guy that I ordered from Tundra catalog. Might have been a kitchen sink. Like they would cross distribute some of those companies, but Mad Men made sense to me. That very first one was some of the first mail order comics I ordered.
Right.
And it was such a perfect gateway. But it was also a time, like in the early 90s, when a guy wasn't going to do alternative comics and Marvel DC.
Right.
Like when he starts doing Marvel DC stuff, it's like, what? How? I didn't even know you could do that.
Oh, totally. It was a big deal. And it was a big deal even, in like comic shop news and stuff.
Another guy who was in that group of like inking with brushes and stuff was Charles Burns, and I probably found him about the same time. And it was so cool just seeing something that it wasn't the Hunt 102. That was so dominant at the Marvel Image DC level.
All right. Okay, Jimmy, so you could take a look. And for this one, I isolated a complete panel. Now, part of the game is that I'm not trying to stump you and confuse you or something. And I'm trying to show off a piece. This is probably one of the bigger pieces. It's a whole panel that I'm letting you see. And as we continue to play, like I might just isolate the pants of a figure. I don't know. I'm going to look for panels where I feel like I could see a little bit of them. But maybe not. So I want you to sort of explain what you're seeing and what direction your mind is in. But I made sure to choose all stylistic.
Yeah, I like this.
Artists.
This is really tough too because not a figure.
Exactly. So what we'll do is like maybe I got 5 comics pulled. I'm not sure if we'll go through all 5 in this video, but we'll start hard. And then we'll slowly become more identifiable. And I think we could probably agree that by the time I show a panel with a character's face, any random character, you'll probably be able to pick up who the artist is.
All right, my guess is Gene Colan.
Okay. What makes you think that?
I think it's 2 parts. One is the line work, kind of the shading. I shouldn't say line work because I was trying to figure out who I think the inker is, and I'm not sure about that. Mm-hmm. But the kind of parallel lines, the spotting of blacks, and the composition. Colan, I kind of think of him as doing this kind of stuff, like twisting and turning. I've often talked about how I see a lot of Kirby in Colan that is not from Kirby, but it's a common thing of like bending perspectives and really getting movement through distortion, but it's his own brand of distortion. I'm a big Gene Colan fan. That's my guess on this.
Yeah, and you know what? You would be right. Now, I want to, and specifically, we're looking at
Oh, interesting.
Howard the Duck number 11. So you got that one pretty quick, and I feel like you might be a ringer. So with maybe the next one, if you have something in mind, say that you have something in mind, and describe the things that are leading you into a direction, and we'll look at a panel or two.
Should say the inker on that was Steve Leo Loha, and I would not have guessed him in many guesses. I didn't even realize that those two worked together.
All right, Jimmy, look away. All right, I'm gonna start. Well, we're not ready yet.
Okay.
I gotta set this up.
By the way, a Gene Colan Doctor Strange Artist Edition would be something I would love.
Yeah.
I would love like a Marvel, maybe do like an Artisan Edition where you pull a couple different comics to showcase some of what I think are, his great works and his strengths.
Right.
Obviously, Tomb of Dracula, and we have that.
Yeah, I've never seen that one though.
But you could do like some Daredevil, some Doctor Strange. Some of his Doctor Strange is really strong stuff. He did the masked Doctor Strange. That was always kind of a cool look to me.
Yeah, I don't think I know that. Okay, man, we're not ready, but I'm gonna isolate something.
He's a guy I'd be curious to see like a Scott Williams try stuff on.
All right, now we're gonna fucking zoom in close here, and we're gonna see how tight we could get, man. If you could guess. So take a look, Jimmy.
Oh man, this is hard. Okay, my first guess is Ditko.
And what's making you think so?
Man, that's harder for me to say. I don't know if I can even say exactly.
And I think that that's part of this conversation is like we are able to identify style, and at this point it's intuitive to us, right? Like it's like, okay, I know this guy drew this, but then this kind of conversation, this guess who game, is trying to identify the bits.
The funny part is, like, I don't know why I think it's Ditko exactly, and I have a feeling if you showed a few artists of comparable time period, and it'd be a long shot, right? I don't know that I would pick, and I don't know if I can tell you exactly it. There's a little bit of line work quality that makes me think of him. I always think of, like, I'm guessing this is a Spider-Man comic maybe, and he would do his own inks on most of that stuff, maybe all of that stuff.
Right.
And he had an ink style that had pen. It wasn't that Joe Sinnott kind of like thick, thin line.
Right.
That super clean, Charles Burns being like the machine version of it. Ditko had a much more organic thing that relied on pens a little bit more than some of the comics of that time period. So you do see some pen inking on this.
Here's the thing, though, man. Is that your final answer, or should we check out another panel or another piece?
Let me
of
see
panel?
another panel because I'm not totally caught. If you told me this was Frank Miller,
Right.
I would go for that too. So that's where I'm at on this. Is a Miller and Ditko, and by the way, Ditko big influence on Miller. So
Let's look at another piece then.
Okay.
So look away. I'm laughing because I saw a panel that I probably should have started with. And so much of this is going to be cut, Jimmy. Like whenever I produce the vid. All right, Jimmy, take a look.
before I do, I'll say this too. That last panel, if it were Herb Trimpe, Al Milgram, or Sal Buscema, I would buy any of those three too because it depends on the inker. A lot of what I was going by there is the line work.
The monitor might be the easiest thing for you to know to
This
see
is okay. I'm gonna stick with Ditko, although this is another one where at a glance I see Frank Miller.
Yeah.
But I think it's Ditko, and I'm gonna say that based on that hand is a little bit non-Millery, and some of the line work is very Ditko inking to me.
Right. One more panel?
You make me think that I'm way off here, man. I guess one more. I'm guessing this must be Miller, and I must be
We're playing a game.
going the wrong direction.
All right, Jimmy, take a look, man.
Is this Kirby inked by Ditko?
No. And I'm not trying to stump you at all with any of this stuff.
Yeah, I give up. I'm looking at hands is a key there, and those hands are strange. That hand on the left, I can get nothing from that. The pointy fingers on the woman on, I guess, on screen on the left there feels like something, but I can't quite piece it together.
It is Ditko.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it is Ditko. Spider-Man number 2
Gotcha. All right.
is what we're looking at there, man. Just teasing it out a little bit. Like, boom, there it is. Or is that Spider-Man 3 or 4? One of the early ones.
That first shot is a really good one to look at because I do think that depending on the inker, because it's a long shot, you know, like that's one of those. It's a common language in comics.
Exactly. Let's do another. Because you're banging them out, Jimmy. You're banging them out. And once again, like I'm not gonna do Bruce Timm drawing like Jack Kirby. Like I'm not trying to fuck you up like that. I think this will be an interesting one. Ooh, yeah. Now the thing is, sometimes you mightn't fucking know these comics, so like I have to kind of go for semi-deep cuts. But I'm gonna, well, let me get it on the record first. Yeah, so typically I'm going to often just like show like when we do the first image of a comic.
Right.
I'm gonna just like isolate something kind of far out, something meager that like I want to see how you know tiny a detail I could give you, and you could like decipher the artist. But I'm going opposite this time. I'm giving you a full figure because I think maybe this first image might not tell the full story. So take a look. And I will never choose somebody that I don't think you won't get.
I think it's definitely Klaus Janson finishing. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that's his pencils, but I'm going to say Klaus Janson all around. And part of that is the way this arm is constructed feels very Janson to me. So that's why I'm guessing him. But the other reason that I think it's his finish, you see, it has very unique line work.
Right.
You know, and often has a chunky element to his inks, which is present there. And then you see his materials where he's using some screen tone or zipatone. He's scraping some stuff away. And that just feels very much... It wouldn't surprise me if this is Klaus Janson pencil, inks, and colors.
You know what? I'm just going to give it to you because it is. And DC Presents 82. And I was hoping you would go in the Sienkiewicz direction to start. Maybe I should have isolated some other stuff. But yeah, he is listed as artist here.
I feel like I am really showing myself. If you only showed this, I would have guessed maybe Miller.
I probably should have started here.
I don't know if I would have got anything from that one.
Well, see, that's the way that I think we got to play this. Is like I got to isolate something super, super tiny and then work our way up.
That one I might have gone with
Sienkiewicz.
Is that on? Yeah, put that on screen. I might have guessed a Sienkiewicz out of that.
Right.
It's interesting how those guys have some real parallels, but then also have some very distinct differences between the two.
You're blasting through. Let's do another one. All right, Jimmy, take a look.
Oh, shit. Oh, man.
Yeah, I'm not giving you too much here.
Yeah, what I'm looking at mostly is line art.
Right.
And I'm going to say John Byrne.
And what do you think is giving you that?
So I don't feel real confident about that, but my takeaway for that reason is mostly he has a system of drawing backgrounds. He's a fast artist, but he doesn't... His backgrounds feel good. You know, even though I think he works fast.
Good perspective.
And so I'm looking at this, and I feel like there's some of his John Byrne-isms in here. But boy, that's a tough one. You know, I don't think about buildings as being a great way to do that. And I'm trying to think specifically. We saw John Byrne Artist Edition recently where there's some bending of like reality elements.
Right.
So not a lot to work on. There's a little bit of hatching there to think about, and that hatching does not rule out John Byrne in my mind. So that's my guess.
Let's take another. Let's look at another panel then. All right, take a look at this one. You sticking with that answer, or you got somebody else in mind?
I am going to stick with that answer, and I feel pretty confident. This figure, the jacket work, the folds, I hate to say even the shadows under the legs, because a lot of artists would do shadows under the legs, but almost body language is what I'm seeing in that one. The rain feels consistent with Byrne, and even things like the reflection and shadows on the window. All of it, none of it cancels out Byrne for me, so I'm going to stick with John Byrne on this.
Yeah, you're right. You're right, Jimmy. And specifically, we're looking at Superman number 11.
It's great too, Carl Kessel on the inks. I was trying to figure out inks on the first one, and I thought those are pretty sharp. Is that Terry Austin? But it wasn't quite there for me.
Right.
So interesting to see like how these different inkers sort of affect stuff.
Let's do one more, and maybe this will be the hardest one. But I feel like once you get to a face, it'll be the easiest. Jimmy, take a look, and if you get it at this much, man, you get a gold star. You getting anything from this?
I'm looking at the very tight hatching and very tight line work and thinking of someone like Miracle Man is what I'm feeling here.
Mm-hmm.
Then it becomes who are we looking at? Gary Leach is my guess, but I don't feel very confident about that, especially given what we have seen so far this episode. That seems like a really far out choice, and then it makes me wonder, like, who else does the hatching like that?
We'll do another. Pull another panel out.
Yeah, let me see another panel. There's some stuff in here that's interesting. You know, I think the contrast between the hatching and the light on the side of those crosses is really tight.
And I purposely didn't give you much, man, because you're really kicking some ass. Take a look, Jimmy, but I think this will be hard as well. And then we'll get gradually, once I start getting into figure work, I think it'll be way more clear.
Man, it's such tight rendering. Like a Rick Veitch comes to mind a little bit in this.
I can see that.
Yeah.
Not giving you too much, right?
There's stuff there, but not a lot. You know, these are kind of distinct looking marks.
Yeah.
Veitch is probably about where I'm at the moment, but also fairly vague.
Let's do another one. All right, I got some figures in here. They'll give, well, let me move it up some. They'll give you something, but not too much. Yeah, lock it in again. And then on the next one, I'll give you a good panel with some.
So there's a little bit of Kubertism in some of these figures, which makes me think it's probably a Cubie. I don't think it's Kubert doing the work, but like some of the wrinkles, and especially in like that arm, remind me of Kubert a little bit. which makes me think someone like Tom Yates, possibly Rick Veitch, is still in play. Doing war comics, there's a little bit of John Severin, and I might be leaning toward John Severin at this point. Trying to think who else did like war comics, with that like tighter style.
Do one more?
Yeah, I'll take one more.
All right. And I'll give you one with a figure. Or actually, you know what? There will be maybe two more unless you want to lock in on this one. But let me just isolate this real quick. All right, Jimmy, take a look,
All
man.
right, so before I even look, I got another guess, and it's Russ Heath. Is
I know what you
my
mean.
current guess.
Yeah.
And looking at that does not discourage me from the Russ Heath guess. But John Severin also comes to mind, and that ink work maybe a little bit more John Severin-like than Russ Heath to me. But both of those guys I think of as being very tight and really good with something like this, like a piece of machinery.
Let's do one with a figure.
Yeah, I'll take a figure. Boy, that's a nice drawing right there.
Yeah, it is. Okay. Like, no, not yet. Like, I just identified the piece that I think will bring it home. All right, Jimmy, take a look, man. So now we got a face in here, and usually the face is the tail, all right?
I'm going to go with Russ Heath. That face is not giving it to me.
It's not good. Oh, we'll do another if it comes to it, man. Are you locked in?
Yeah, that's my guess, because I don't know that I know. It's between him and Severin for me.
Yeah.
And I don't know that I can distinguish those two that well in my head.
I see.
I'm sure they are very, if you're big on one of those guys, you can probably pick it out from across the room.
Right.
But in my mind, I think of them as being somewhat similar, and I don't know their styles well enough to distinguish between the two.
That's fair. It is Severin.
Okay.
It is Severin. But I know exactly what you mean, man, because sometimes the brawny faces. I tried to give you a good one that would give you the Severin stuff, and specifically this is Our Fighting Forces Volume 21, number 150 is the comic that we're looking at there.
And I think one of the giveaways for Severin is the some of these hatching tick marks.
Right.
There's some differences there.
He does it too.
He does.
And once again, I wasn't trying to stump you, but I could totally see how you could go Russ Heath.
I was thinking too, back to this first image.
Right.
And it really reminds me of Russ Heath because I think of him as precision.
Yeah.
Precision, and both these guys are phenomenal light artists, light and dark. Boy, this is a beautiful comic too. I've gone through phases of tracking down some of these war comics for both Heath and Severin.
Right.
And some of the Russ Heath stuff that's amazing is the very early Marvel war comics.
Yeah.
I guess it was timely maybe at
Right.
the time.
Yep.
Seeing some of that stuff in reprints has really been a revelation to me. But Severin's one of those kind of unsung guys. I don't know that he turned in a bad job.
There are pages here that I don't think are Severin. I think there are other hands on, that doesn't feel very Severin-ish to me. But it's still page number 9.
Yeah.
But I tried to get the most Severin-ish stuff. If I would have isolated this, would you have said Severin, you think?
Possibly. Again, I have trouble distinguishing those two
Yeah.
guys in my head. So once I start thinking about one, I don't know if there's a visual that would really tip me the other way.
Kayfabe, how do you do on the Guess Who game? And Jimmy, what do you think about this, man? You think this has legs?
I do like this. There's all kinds of stuff that I feel like could be added to. Some of these, there may be a distinct colorist that shows up from time to time. I was thinking, guess the time period of what you're looking at. There's a lot of these little versions of this game. at play here. I think it's really interesting. I think we'll have some fun going forward with this. And I like the idea of looking at this stuff and then really talking about why is this person distinct? Why does this panel say Gene Collin?
Yeah.
I think that's something that would be fun to have those conversations spin out of this. So
Agreed. You good to go?
yes.
Yeah, so Kayfabers, what do you think about that for the maiden voyage? Now, it's obviously I'm going to edit that a lot so that it's very seamless. But I think we got something there. And also, I think that's something that we can use in on social media. You know, like just like do like each one of those is like a thing. Can you guess the artist?
Yeah, I think it creates some room for spontaneity, and I think that's where you can get like a little short video or something
Right.
interesting might come out of it.
Right.
And like I say, I think it's an interesting way to discuss some of these artists that I don't know that we're going to do the losers.
Exactly.
issue
Exactly.
as
I got
a
all these
stand-up video,
comics. I got all
but
these
it's
comics.
kind of a good use of that, you know? Like
Yeah.
that's really, yeah, it may lead to other stuff too.
Yeah.
It's a good spin out.
Right. This is a wild comic though, man. Like it's Klaus really doing some wild stuff, and it's a good job he turns in.
I think I have this one. That's phenomenal.
Yeah. Yeah, he's got a couple, you know, he's got something on every page.
The stuff where he does everything himself really pops. And what's the date on this? Is this like 82 or something? Is this like... The reason I say it is when he leaves... When
85.
Miller... Okay, that's a good bit later. I was going to say, when Miller leaves Daredevil, I feel like Klaus kind of steps up to be like, hey, it's not just Miller. And you see it in the following issues. There's some real standouts that he's coloring and drawing.
Right.
Feels like he's, at the height of his powers in a lot of ways.
Right.
That's better. I'm going to leave that on this shelf. It's microphones here. That makes sense to look for microphone stuff there. Yeah, I think
Kayfabe
dudes
saying?
enjoyed that.
Yeah,
Love
sweet.
it. Edit will be fun. Looks fun. Yeah, I think the edit is something too that we'll have to learn too. You know, like the shut up until now, go.
Right.
That kind of thing, just to make the edit a little bit more concise.
Yeah, and, you know, like when we don't have that, you just do the wipe. Like everybody understands what that means in,
Yeah.
in edit language, so we'll be good. I have no fear about the edit job on that.
Yeah, it's a great idea, man. Anything that uses comics that we have
Yeah.
that aren't being used some other way is a really good way to think about
Exactly.
some new show concepts.
Exactly. Want to do the Marvels?
Yeah.
And stuff right now. Let me go pee real quick. I'm gonna get that other iPad real quick.
You guys have any New Year's resolution plans mapped out yet? I got all kind of stuff going on my New Year's plans. Mostly workout and staying on schedules. I think I'm going to try to build a garden this year.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been wanting one for a while, and you think like at some point life's short, and why haven't I done it?
We want to get real tight on this. That was a big piece of feedback. Is the light on this bitch?
Yeah, I don't know.
It might go on whenever we start recording.
It's on now.
Yeah. I just saw something click. Boom, boom. All right, so
This one's not.
these are the two bits that we left out
Mm-hmm.
on the previous video. So we should just blast through those real quick and then jump to these. And it was just they got put into a different arrangement. I'm good if you are. Was that my water? Was that your water?
This one's yours, I think.
Here, we'll trade off.
That one's not mine either. That one was here when I got here.
Oh shit.
I haven't opened mine yet, so mine's just a full
see.
water.
Let me get the chat up. So we're going to be taking a look at the December 1961 cover dates. So that came out probably September, October.
Mm-hmm.
All right, good to go.
Hello and welcome to your favorite YouTube channel, Cartoonist Kayfabe. My name is Jim Rugg.
I'm Ed Piscor.
And if you are new to Cartoonist Kayfabe, I want to let you know that we are a daily comic book YouTube channel. We have been doing this for years, so we have 1,600 videos or so in our back catalog, and you can search those on our Cartoonist Kayfabe YouTube homepage. You can search by your favorite artist or your favorite title. Chances are we have covered some of that. I also want to remind everybody that we have a Cartoonist Kayfabe Patreon that helps keep the light on, and we have 3 different levels there. The top level, the King Kayfaber level, gives you access to all of our videos first because you can sit in on the live recording session every week. This will give you a leg up on the kayfabe effect. If we look at something that you want to add to your collection, you want to be the first one in line. Whether it's rare or going up in price, that will pay for itself with the right book. And also, it's just a fun conversation to have to sit in on these early videos. So check out our Patreon, see which level works for you, and we'll see you in the live session if you choose the King Kayfaber level. So this is part of an ongoing series we just started, looking at the history of the Marvel Universe through the publication of its comics in order, starting in November 1961. That is in our archives. If you missed that, check it out.
Yeah,
but
we have a playlist that we're developing.
We did miss 2 books from that very first month of the Marvel Universe, so we're going to start this video and pick up those books, Tales of Suspense and Tales to Astonish. So here's Tales of Suspense 23. Marvel's doing a lot of the monster kind of atomic age books still at this time, and that's what you see here.
Starting off with the Kirby.
Yes. It's funny. This is the Indicia says Fear is the name of this one.
Okay, so this is a reprint.
Gotcha.
You know, from the 70s. We got a weird smattering here of various books.
How about that inking for a backdrop of just like black ink with no real specific shape on there? Man, some of these monster books to me are fantastic. And actually, last episode, I mentioned there was a 2-dimensional element. This is what it's from. You see this character going through some sort of horrific transformation and becoming 2-dimensional. I love this kind of stuff. I feel like it works really well in a comic.
I feel like it's Jack Kirby cutting promos on like Siegel and Shuster.
Oh, no.
Right there, right? Like that looks like that Superman type image.
Very cool. And almost a level of like paranoia. You can see this emphasis on eyes. Reminds me of Ditko art in a lot of ways.
Yeah, maybe he's cutting promos on Ditko.
And speaking of Ditko, here we go with the second story, Creature from the Black Blog, and absolutely phenomenal. Right. So good. I feel like this may be the height of Ditko's powers as a drawer around this early 60s time period because, man, it's strong.
Hard to argue.
It's also interesting in these early stages to see elements that you're going to see carry over into the Marvel Silver Age that we know, and you think of like the archetypal Ditko or Kirby art. You see it all here.
You do. Yeah, I mean, they're fully formed at this point. You need to put them on the vehicle, you know, the vehicle that's going to kind of propel them into fame.
Also, you see the attention, if you guys are mostly contemporary comics readers, you'll see the ability to do the black and white art at this stage is something that's very, very strong, something that's kind of been phased out over the years with different technology, but something that really kind of, I think of Alex Toth a lot, and whenever you look at this stuff, it's like everybody seems to be great at the black and white at this era. Another monster comic here, Tales to Astonish, number 25.
When you see these super thick outlines on like the word balloons and stuff, not the blue, but you see the black, that suggests that these are paste-ups because it was sort of famous that Stan Lee and Martin Goodman would arrange the typography or the hand lettering in all different ways and stuff. So, like, these are probably elements that were on a single piece of paper. And when you have that big, bold line, it's easier to cut out than just a simple pen stroke.
Yeah, fantastic. You see the creature stepping out of television. I feel like that's a motif that, I don't know, maybe every publisher had at some point.
Like a Ringu.
Yes. Tales to Astonish, published by Vista. We've talked a little bit about the different imprints that appear in the indicia as a result of how distribution worked at that time. And these are comics that, like, I have read in various reprints.
Yeah.
So you can find these monster comics if you like what you're seeing on here. Fortunately, they have been reprinted at different times, too. I think in the 70s, and then, like, in omnibuses and trade paperbacks in the 80s and up to today.
Is this one all Kirby? Because in our...
That's a good question.
I mean, this is Kirby for sure. So we got 2 Kirbys so far. Because there will be, like, the Steve Ditko book.
Yes. Oh, man, what a great... You know, it's such a simple panel, but a Martian spy, you know?
It's good.
Fantastic.
And the transition to 3 panels, like, you know, leading a part of that sequence.
And I feel like this is your DNA for a lot of conspiracy theory stuff and also Scooby-Doo episodes.
Yeah, it's true.
All right, not a Kirby here.
No, this is probably like your Don Heck or Dick Ayers. Because that's the thing, those guys are here also, you know? Like the gang's all here.
I think one of the things I'm going to take from us going through this series is some of the color treatments. Mm-hmm. You know, there's a lot of great flat primary colors in this stuff as well. Here's a Ditko
showing up.
Doing a ghost story, you get kind of that haunted house look in the background.
And I think it's unmistakable that he lettered that title treatment for sure.
That's been a bit of a revelation just going through a couple of months of this stuff is the Ditko splash pages from these short stories. Oh man, I think they're beautiful and they're kind of unique. You know, it's really a lot of Ditko compared to, you know, I don't know if there's a house standard. All right, so Amazing Adult Fantasy number 7. And I was looking even at the cover. This is an issue. This is all Ditko, this issue. And it might be the best looking Ditko page by page that I've seen. But even the cover is distinct. You know, it doesn't have that Marvel pasted up kind of blurbs.
It feels like a magazine.
Yeah,
like
totally
a proper
different.
magazine. And the way he builds that figure, like it's a little bit covered up by the color right here. But when you could see the actual cover and you see the artwork, the way he builds that anatomy, it feels so solid. He's a really, really good figure drawer, and he can lock in those shapes, like, you know, the Bridgman's constructive anatomy stuff. Like he locks in those shapes and makes it into like a really, really solid figure. In the future, when we get into like the Incredible Hulk, like, you know, issue 1, 2, and he's drawing that stuff, you get to really see how he builds these figures.
I think that the handling of the color is pretty strong too, because
Absolutely.
this background's all light blue and gray, and then you have an orange figure and it very popping out, but even the little kid in the front of the crowd pops out by adding a little extra color on him.
Yeah, and then Roy G. Biv with the captions, just very smart treatment, very smart like splash page. It's
I haven't seen a splash like this in any of the other comics.
Yeah, I mean, this is the Steve Ditko magazine.
It is, and I think that adult thing is something too that they're maybe trying to figure out. How do you try to sell more comics on a stand that's full? And I'll see like photos of newsstands sometimes where it's just packed with comics from this era. Tough to stand out.
Right.
So here we go, man. One of the Ditko splashes that we're talking about, just a different approach to his splash pages than everybody else. Already the 9-panel grid used a lot by Ditko.
And you could imagine this being like a Spider-Man page, basically. You know, like he really does have the fully formed style.
Yes.
And it'll be fun to see when he starts doing the superhero stuff, because it'll still be, you'll sort of see what he brings extra.
If we only had this image, I feel like that could be an issue of 8 Ball in 1993. You know what I mean? It's striking, it's compelling, it makes you want to read more.
Right.
And yet it doesn't feel like your standard splash page. Although put a little mustache on here and we've got J. Jonah Jameson.
Yeah, you do.
He is packing story in too with these 9-panel pages. Like he was earning his money. Great to see. Still 9 panels, but we're breaking the grid. Witch Hunt, another striking one, and one we could put into a couple Full Moon zine panels here. But great color once again, you know, and it's totally simple color theory. Blue background, orange foreground.
I think the lettering is some kind of paste up or something.
Yeah, it's definitely a font, that Witch Hunt lettering. I have one of those omnibuses of some of these monster comic reprints, and you can really see it as you go through like a bunch of splash pages together. Another just classic composition. Really simple, but sings with that 4-color added on top. You also get a sense of the science fiction of this stuff in terms of a genre, you know, especially before the superheroes come back.
That's cool to see, man. Read a panel downward.
Yeah. Boy, that whole sequence, that whole row really great.
Yeah, very discombobulating.
Yeah, I go, man, that's another row that's pretty inventive in terms of your different panel layouts.
I think that face got away from Uncle Steve a little bit, huh?
This would be one if you had it on your iPad, you could just circle the mouth and just move it up a little bit. Great panel, though, sitting in the prison, using the prison bars as your part of your framing device.
Man, they were selling grit back then.
I love all this stuff. The ads for the next issue. It does feel like this series is a little bit of a different series than the typical Marvel stuff. Although, at this time, I don't know that there is typical Marvel. You know, they have 3 or 4 of each genre book. Man, Ditko just sings. Were you surprised by the Ditko quality of that book? Like, all Ditko, like, that's one that, if you ever stumbled across that thing in a bad condition, it'd be a nice one to add to the collection.
Absolutely.
All right, Journey into Mystery. So, again, continuing with that Atomic Age of Monsters, pretty striking this color use here in our foreground. Almost a fluorescent green-yellow on this character.
You could almost imagine these covers, like those drawings, as being roughs for an inevitable, like, painted, like, pulp paperback kind of cover.
Kind of surprised somebody hasn't done that. Feels like we may start to see those come out of an episode like this.
Doom is a word that Stan Lee likes to use in these titles. Like in some of that Tales of Suspense that we looked at first, the Doom was, big splash page.
Totally different take on the subject, like splash page wise, and I love it just as much with Kirby here delivering the giant oomph kind of image on that page 1.
But we're getting like that is like Artie Simek lettering, and then I guess, well, is that hand done?
Oh yeah, I think so.
Yeah, so I guess Artie's in house.
And we pointed this out last time, but you see certain things that fall away from Kirby as time goes on, and this kind of divided panel is not one we see a lot of in his work.
It's probably, when he's able to do an issue's worth of stuff, he can let things breathe a little bit more, but Stan Lee is packing shit into these little 7-pagers.
I thought this panel, this girl encounters an alien monster, and his message is, go tell your people that I'm here, and I thought that's its own story. The girl, if you don't know that she actually saw the monster, and it's just this girl that shows up.
It's
with
a cry wolf story.
Far out story.
Doing that stuff that Kirby does like much later, like the deadline crunchers.
Yeah. It helps though.
Oh, totally.
You want that variety of panels, and that's a good variety. Not sure.
I think that's a Kirby.
Yeah, some of it's very Kirby-esque, and some of it's a little bit different.
We saw some of that Dick Ayers that had Kirby flavor to it.
I like this, too. That's a panel arrangement you're not going to see Kirby make very often.
Right.
So it is fun, like, still seeing him just working and kind of learning what he likes and figuring out his storytelling.
That feels unmistakably Kirby, huh?
That does feel totally Kirby. Same with this figure, and I love this sequence. Great use of incorporating your lettering into the storytelling.
You don't see that often in these Marvel books. That's a good treatment.
Oh, you know what? I had to point this out. Monongahela Monroe was the first man on Venus. Do we
good.
think there's a Pittsburgh writer in here? Monongahela is not a word that you see in print a lot. And Paul Rainman, we talked about in the previous episode, an artist I had never heard of before last week.
Yeah, I think he inked Kirby on maybe some of these early Fantastic Fours or something.
The other thing that we've mentioned in the past is how these guys are really good, and yet they don't bring what the Kirby Ditkos bring to it. That little bit of stylization is important. It's something I'm not always didn't always think of in my development, but like figuring out that style is a really valuable piece to add.
And what's interesting is like what's happening across the street with DC is like everybody has that very like clear line like clip art type drawing style, and that Paul Rainman guy could probably fit into that. So the Kirby and the Ditko, like that stuff was considered kind of ugly,
right?
At that era, because it is wonky and it's weird, but it really is like that's the art showing through.
Look at some of these panels of just like the close-ups of the faces, the way Ditko handles it. Relatively simple panel layouts, but I love this sequence because, okay, talk about disorientation, right? Let's turn our figure around within the panels. You're almost tumbling down the page as you read it.
Very thoughtful.
Amazing. I would also tell everybody at home, pay attention to the advertising as we go through here. It's one of the great things that this collection has, or having all the pages intact. You get to see, like, who is the target, who's the demographic of these comics.
Absolutely.
All right, so, again, Marvel seems to have a handful of different types of books that they're doing, and these kinds of either young romance or girl heroine, that's part of it. And probably 3 or 4 of their books a month at this time.
This is so shameless, too. Like, such a fucking clone of Betty and Veronica. down to a blonde and brunette. I mean, it's the same faces, but then when you introduce
Right.
any other characters, they're completely off model. Like, look, this girl is in their universe.
That's amazing. That's two different types of comic book language right there.
Yeah, and you see
So
both
good.
of them in one panel, really.
Yeah,
With this like Lou Abner kind of feller.
that's hilarious. And I think this is Stan Goldberg. I
think
believe.
so.
It's
Yeah,
funny
there it is.
because
Look at that.
yeah, that's so weird. You can play a game of like find his signature
Right.
because it's almost him and Stan fighting over who gets to sign the books and where. So sometimes it'll be like on page 4, you'll see Stan's signature.
You know, Dan DeCarlo shows up in here too, I believe.
Oh, interesting.
He might have been in some of the 50s ones. I don't know if he still was kind of sticking around.
There's the Stan Goldberg
right.
signature.
It's even a damn ginger redhead boy. Like they are just shameless. And from what I
You're so right.
from what I understand, like there's Reggie. Like the gang's all here. It's just the Bizarro World version of them. But from what I understand with Magazine Management Corporation,
This is a great panel
yeah,
because it's busting up that Archie model. And again, I think Stan recognizes it Goldberg because he's putting a signature on that particular panel.
But Martin Goodman would do that with his whole magazine enterprise. Yeah. Like, you know, like he wasn't Playboy, but he was like Swank and Cherry and like some of those kind of mags and stuff.
Yeah, it's something I think is lost on fans sometimes whenever they're like, that was a great story, or I really like this character. And it's like, this was so bottom line driven.
Right.
And it had to be. If it didn't work, like you're out of business. And a lot, you know, look at all the companies that came and went. Not an easy, this is not a very profitable business practice. I've been, somebody is putting together kind of an EC presentation. I've gotten a chance to look at it, and it has breakdowns on like what they make on an issue and how many you need to sell and things like that. And you realize like
Slim margins.
one bad mistake could sink a publisher.
Yeah, absolutely. So it makes sense. Like whenever they do have like a nominal hit, like then Martin will institute another couple titles, and that's how you get Linda Carter, Night Nurse, or whatever that other stuff is. So you can imagine when a numbers start to come in after a couple of months of Fantastic Four, it's like, we need some more of that.
You know what's wild is all of this stuff is mail order.
Yeah.
Even like education, like correspondence courses or something that are in several of the ads, it's all mail.
And some of those it might still be the era of unregulation where they could really rob kids. You know, like they could really jack them up.
This also looks like Stan Goldberg, maybe. So
Yeah, totally.
it may have been a series. It may have been a type of book that was doing well for them at the time.
Well, Archie was huge, and I think it was even in that EC thing that you're talking about, where like there were numbers, like
we have a color gimmick here.
right.
Here we are, 60 years later, still doing color gimmicks.
But in that information that we were checking out, like the Archie books were selling in the millions in the 60s. So it makes sense that you gotta crib a little bit of that.
All right, man. We were looking at Ditko splash pages and saying that looks like a font. Here's the same exact font. This electric monorail. And look at how the designer dresses it up by adding a couple speed lines to it.
Yeah.
Really cool. Because that Dazzle, same font.
It is. It's called Balloon. If you want to play at home. Stan Lee's signature everywhere.
It is, man.
But this is Millie the model. We had Kathy. So you have these adjacent titles.
You know, Stan Lee has his signature on here, and so does Stan Goldberg. What is Stan Lee writing here? Because, like, the only text is calling out who sent in this design or whatever.
He just sees you know what it is? It's like
Just sign every page. It's almost like the
well,
editorial
it's
sign off.
It's Disney, and you know it's the same thing that Matt Groening kind of cribbed.
It's fascinating.
You see Groening's name on TV guide covers and stuff. He hasn't drawn that stuff. He can't draw that good.
Yeah, it's funny that those guys don't get a harder time about that. You know, like Disney and Groening, everything is their hand.
They do, and like it's a joke in Simpsons land and stuff. Like I remember, I forget which video game it was, but there's a part where like the Matt Groening like Simpsons character comes out and he writes his signature and then like jumps off. So like it's a thing.
Hey, here's something that I think is noteworthy. You see Al Hartley's signature on this cover. We've pointed out some signatures on various stories. And then there are stories with no signature.
Right.
What is the deal with that? You know, it's almost like the artist maybe has the option of putting a name on there and doesn't.
Right.
And maybe they're choosing that they're ashamed of this line of work.
Totally.
But the flip side is, like, take credit for your work, people. You know, like, most people aren't going to object to you signing it after we talk about Groening and Disney policies.
Right.
So I liked Hartley was a standout to me. And we talked about how some of these faces are wild, whereas like other stuff you sort of just go along, it works, and then you'll get something that's just crazy wonky out of left field. There's one in here, hopefully I won't miss it, and it is a missing face.
Look at these weird textures, you know, and you could tell
Just
like
quick brush.
Yeah, you know
Let's
how
just push the tip down.
in the Dave Sims stuff with like about the Nightingale lines and stuff.
Yeah.
Like you see this same line there, and you see that it's the same bluntness as like this line right there.
I mean, I don't think there's any doubt the reason the brush became so prominent is how fast it was.
Sure, but his use of it, like I really think that there's just like a flat marker.
I love this like side profile, side profile, side profile, side profile. It's almost, and the other way too, you know, it's so fast. You can almost imagine if you couldn't draw, you could put together a story like this relatively quickly just by tracing a couple of these.
Before Stepford Wives, man.
By the way, this is why you do a big heavy line back in the day, because registration could be so far off, and even there, the lipstick's completely outside of the line.
And that's considered probably a good print job by those standards of that day.
That's so funny. This might have been the one where where'd the face go? We see there's a few instances of this. It's kind of that backwards 3/4,
right.
But it feels like the way this is drawn, we should see a little bit of face coming out of there.
Yeah,
and it's almost like the Invisible Woman.
Cousin It.
More of that color idea. It's pretty funny. I bet you if you find like this coverless comic in real life, half of them probably are like colored in. This would have been the YA of the time too, because these are older characters, whereas this is selling to, I don't forget, 7 or 8 year olds, but the characters are like teenagers.
And look at it, man. I mean, this is the 4th title of this kind of comics.
Yeah, another Al Hartley signature. Interesting if we went through and listed like the artists that are involved in these books.
Half dozen?
Yeah, it's a very small number, It's almost like Stan knows who he can rely on and bring it on. These are kind of fun. You see a little bit more of Al Hartley doing some drawing here to try to do like hairstyles or whatever you're selling in this case. A little bit different than just his typical style. And look at that. That's one of those. She looks excited. That could be a Joker. Like she's had some laughing gas.
But when you see those faces, though, it's all the exact same amount of lines that Jaime puts in his profiles. But you could just like he just puts them in like the exact perfect compositions.
Yeah, and they're not that far off. It makes me think of the Jaime Artist Edition where like you'll see whiteout and it'll be like he moved that line 1/16 of an inch.
Yeah, and you criticize.
It looks perfect now.
Right.
But that's what this is. Like the ingredients are very close.
That feels Clausian.
Yeah, it does.
And
both
look
of
at
those
that,
faces look Clausian.
It's a more anthropomorphic, like human Dennis the Menace. With the same shirt and all of it.
Really interesting to me that whenever you see some of these alternative cartoonists, almost like a similar style or line.
It's the most drawn out Hartley did in any of these goddamn things.
It's pretty good.
Man, they really just pad those books, and I mean, why wouldn't like chicks like that? I'm sure that was like a fun feature.
Boy, Al Hartley though is going for it in terms of signature.
Yeah.
Stan's getting credit. I want credit. This figure felt very Jaime to me. This coach, might be the line work on the legs or whatever, or even the body
drapery.
language of like the posture of kind of sitting back.
Yeah, it's real good drapery, and also like there's sort of the same amount of backgrounds in a way as like a Jaime comic.
Yeah, I really like the way that is handled in terms of color in a lot of these. Like this is a really good example to me of color. It's a nighttime scene. We know that because there's a light on the street, so it's not black in the background. I mean, it's not even color, it's white, but you can tell it's dark, and then they do the darkness on the foreground. That's
right.
Really cool.
Yeah, really frames our guy.
Yes.
Real well.
That's a pretty unusual panel, with our hero in the foreground at a different scale, and then you can see the bad guys talking about him as he's riding by.
I bet you see that kind of dissolve and wipe in, like, Westerns of the day or something.
Yeah, like a double exposure film. Worked really well, though, for a panel, and it's that simple stuff, yellow background. Just flat yellow to color those guys.
Very Kurtzman like this set of panels right here with the fight. We know that's Kirby, but I'm just saying the composition.
Yeah, there's some really good like standoffs and things. And blue, this could be fighting robots.
Right, Rock'em Sock'em, yeah.
Yeah, it's neat going through this stuff and seeing Kirby applied a little bit differently than the superhero work that we know him for.
Yeah, and this is the stuff, Shelton Drum, proprietor of Heroes Aren't Hard to Find comic shop in Charlotte, North Carolina. Like, this is his steez, if you remember, man. Like, he collects all the Marvel Westerns.
Great glove, and it feels like the gloves that you would see like a Jack Davis do over Harvey Kurtzman layouts.
Yeah.
And how about that, man? Drawing a tornado and then the guy getting swept up in the tornado. It's fun drawing, you think like, I'm sure you're drawing this stuff as fast as you can, but I mean, look at that for a setup. That's a Dick Ayers on the artwork here, and what a splash page. Makes me think like this is something he enjoyed drawing.
Right.
A little extra elbow grease, I think, visible in this on this story. This is one of those standout panels. Isolate that panel and Lichtenstein paint that one.
Absolutely. That's a piece of pop art for sure.
But a lot of these panels have that quality, like the following panel with the Blam.
Absolutely.
Pretty great. I don't know what that is either. That's a hard one for me to put my finger on, but I think it really stands out.
When these show up, like, I gotta think that Kirby touched it. I really do, man. Like, do you not see the Kirby in there? Am I crazy?
No, you're right, but it may be that you've seen a lot of Kirby with Ayers on top of him.
Yeah.
Or something. I don't know. I know what you're saying, and I can't totally explain it. And it happens a lot. Like, we'll look at something, and I'll be like, oh, I see this artist or that artist. And it may not even be that they look at each other. It's just...
The zeitgeist?
Yeah, something like that. You're seeing probably art pass through as you come into the office, bring yours in, take yours out. Maybe get a note from Stan Lee where it's like, hey, look what Jack's doing. Do a little more of this.
Those Kirby mouths I always liked, man. Just the geometry of it, pizza wedge.
Yeah. No Kirby signature, though,
Fantastic drapery. Like, real thick, chunky lines. Makes me wonder who the inker is.
Mm-hmm.
It might be Dick Ayers. And
that's a great Kirby face.
Jaime said it, his inker for Kirby is Dick Ayers. Like, that's what he likes.
That's interesting. It almost reminds me of, like, some of the European stuff. How they'll, like, caricature a figure a little bit more, or a face, and I feel like that's almost one of those types. Although movies were that way, where you really had the supporting actors that they just looked that way.
Yeah, character actors.
Great action sequence too, fighting with that rope in between.
Yeah, a little bit of business. Using 100% magenta.
These kind of close-up panels, I think, are really effective, and the back of somebody's head works well.
So abstract.
A lot of the panels too that they end with that horse riding off in silhouette, almost a TV show that you're adapting. Yeah, the Kirby stuff's so distinct. These figures, I don't know what it is, like just standing there when we talk about like playing that game of isolate a panel, it's so distinct, and it's just the back of a dude.
Right. But he's still, like these eyes, I guess I do see it. Never mind.
Love that too.
And dude, look at that, man. That's probably our earliest instance of like what's approaching to become Kirby Crackle.
Yes.
So we're getting proto versions of that stuff showing up here, which is pretty fucking cool.
Yeah, that's wild, man. It runs across a couple panels.
Because it's not quite what we associate with, but I mean it's basically the prototypical version there, man. Look at all of that.
Are you surprised by how well what these look like going through? Because I was kind of raised that this was secondary Kirby, and that it's Fantastic Four.
Yeah, here's the thing. I mean, it's the same month as Fantastic Four, so he's there. And the thing is, they did this stuff in the 50s even. So like, there's a range of this material for sure. It's
been very fun to me going through this because I'm just mesmerized by how good almost every panel looks. Double lighting on the face. Just beautiful little details, and it's always like just a panel.
Yeah, you gotta wonder if that comes from his Sky Masters business when Wally Wood is inking on them, and like, oh yeah, I gotta add that to my piece, man. Back 3/4 view, super hard to draw.
Paul Raymond's contribution, pretty good splash page. I like how that looks.
It's possible Kirby's laying that one out, man.
It is. I even like this kind of panel, like a bunch of the people working the telephone boards.
Dude, it looks like a piece of like propaganda comics for the phone company or something.
I'm such a sucker for models. I'm a big fan of the
like model kits.
Well, not those, but like any of the monster movies that would have the dude in a suit and the little model for the set.
Yeah,
always love that stuff. This is a story. Do you know who draws this?
I would say Ditko.
I don't think so.
I look at that face.
If it is Ditko, somebody else is inking it.
Right.
That may be what throws me off. But I like this story a lot art-wise. and it's not somebody I recognize.
I feel like I see the Ditko. You're right. There's a weird inker on top of it, but that's a Ditko hand.
Love this panel a lot, and it reminds me of, if you've ever seen the series The Face, there's an issue, maybe it's issue 3, and it's Alex Toth cover, and it's like this, where it's like a green masked figure from the 80s.
Yeah, that's a weird bunch of ink in, but I feel like Ditko is under there.
Man,
look at that face. That's a Ditko face.
The figures don't feel Ditko-ish though, like that kind of pose.
It's got extra stuff added on to it for sure.
Yeah, it really makes me wonder.
He didn't ink this.
I love the silhouette. Like, there's stuff in here that I really like, and I'm curious. Maybe somebody at home knows who that mystery artist is. But that was one that kind of popped. Love this for Ditko. Could almost be Frank Miller right here.
Right.
You can I imagine Miller looking at this stuff and really taking it to heart. I like the coloring too. Kind of a great detail in that background.
You could tell they liked it too.
Yes.
Here it is, dude. Oh no, is this?
No.
No. Yeah, this is like it's a month before, I believe. We introduced Hank Pym.
You know, like that spread is beautiful. You know, nothing. It works so well to me. This is almost a Kirby self-portrait.
Right.
Just kind of cool, you know, even when he was in the army.
Yeah, like this is like him when he was a kid, and then that's like forward projection.
Great face, great lighting.
It's really sharp. Like it's sharper than it should be at this time.
Yeah, you wonder.
Is sitting on this?
Yeah, who's inking this stuff too? Great whenever he does break from the panel and have an open panel. Just a tour de force.
This is pretty gorgeous. A little proto Loki. The imagination is all over this.
Yes.
You know, like...
Boy, that close-up eyeball panel,
Uh-huh.
So distinct. So arresting. And then it's like you turn the page and now...
Atmospheric Ditko.
It's awesome.
Oh, no, is this...
I think this is Ditko.
Yeah, that's a Ditko.
Wonder if this is one that's being inked too, because when I looked at it,
so.
I was like, oh man, he's doing some different stuff with the inking, with hatching and things like that, but it may be some other finisher on top of him.
Yeah, I think that's what we're dealing with. Because, I mean, dude, these guys are drawing pages.
They really are. But it's really great. I love the atmosphere that he's putting in here. Good motion. Very distinct, again, from the Kirby stuff. And now we see Ditko, and I think inking himself.
Right. Real cool lettering. The Mad Magazine font.
I do wonder now that you mentioned it on some of the previous splash pages if he's lettering his splashes.
Some of those he definitely was. I don't know about that one, but there were ones where like you just know his hand when, and it's like when you know his like Robin Snyder books where he's doing all the lettering and stuff where you could tell.
That's a pretty bold cover because you're showing small images.
Right.
You know, like on a very colorful newsstand rack, it feels like that's some balls, especially with gray as your background.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah. Like, make that 100% yellow or something.
Both of the images are pretty good. If you can get somebody to get close enough to look at them, it's like, yeah, you've got something compelling there. Four-armed men. I'm a sucker for the four-arm character design. And again, there's your Kirby. It's almost like a hypnotic thing of like you're reading this and now you're sucked in, or you're flipping through and it's like you're drawn into it.
I love that underplane of the lip where you saw the lip with shadow. It feels really solid and three-dimensional.
I like the inking on this too. It's relatively soft. I think it's neat. You know, it's I love Kirby stylized, and you get the Mike Royers and stuff that are really following that style.
Right.
But I also like seeing the stuff where it's almost like a good illustrator's coming in and is shading and doing some feathering and everything. Just great panels once again, you know, close up of a face, and look at this. Just desperation expressed on our evil four-armed monster. But easy to read. Very easy to understand. And this gimmick of walking through walls is just peculiar.
It's a good look.
It is.
It's a good look. And then, he'll have that character, the Stranger, that could do that kind of stuff. And there'll be a lot of images like that.
You know, you talk about like things that you're going to see in the future. And I feel like there's Dr. Strangeisms on display all through this story. And really through a lot of these sci-fi horror kind of stories, there'll be those far out elements. Another way to go with strange eyeballs.
So many words on the page. With a whole lot of saying nothing.
How about that for a splash page? Bob Forgione?
Interesting.
And I may be butchering the pronunciation of that name. Not a name that I recognize, But dude, I think that's amazing.
Yeah, it feels cutting edge. Like this feels like graphic design that comes much later.
I even like the choice of the line around those letters. You know, that
Totally.
jaggy line.
It feels almost Filipino. You know, like the Alcalas and the Alex Ninos and stuff.
Yeah, some kind of pen there. Great. You know, again, this is a guy that I don't think of as like a Ditko Kirby, but I look at this and it's like, I like, these panels look amazing to me.
Totally.
And I compliment the colorist too. You know, it's kind of reserved in the way they're using yellow to pop against this blue nighttime.
Yeah, you wonder about
Look
a
at
guy.
that.
You wonder about a guy like this who kind of falls off. Like, did he just not make deadlines? Because like he stacks up there.
Yeah, if anybody knows about this guy, I'd be curious because that's a good looking story, and I don't know of his work anywhere else. Hopefully, we'll get a few more as we continue going through these Marvel back issues. Unmistakable Ditko, cool lettering that looks a little bit like Kirby Fourth World lettering.
It does, yeah, like the Royer type shit, man. And you know, it's a dreamscape. So props to the colorist for actually doing something with the color.
I've been impressed by color in a lot of this. I wonder if Marie Severin is coloring some of these things. You know,
Right.
coming from EC Comics, and now here she is, kind of similar concepts. We talk about the prone figure being hard to draw. How about having that prone figure floating through three-dimensional spaces? And how about that for, again, color restraint?
That's amazing. Yeah, like you just don't see that at this era at all. You don't even really see it in the stuff that Kurtzman controlled.
It's really thoughtful, you know, having red in your middle panel, really thoughtful, using that color to pop.
And they were doing a promo there for Amazing Adult Fantasy.
Oh, yeah.
So do we not have a... Jimmy, was this all?
Yeah, that's it. Which, yeah, it doesn't say the issue, which probably seems like a smart advertising move.
Right.
But I wonder...
But you notice no Fantastic Four.
Bi-monthly schedule
Yep.
early on. And we talked about that, you know, that there's one... The distributor is DC Comics, and they're limited on their number that they can put out there. And who knows? At this point, I don't know if Martin Goodman's wanting to have more comics out there. You know, there's rumors around this time that he's thinking about shutting down the comics division, so I don't think it was doing great. But as the Marvel Universe picks up steam, it's certainly going to be, we could do more books if we were only able to distribute them. And we'll see it manifested as we see books that are, you know, 2 features in each book.
What's interesting here is like the Ditko book is Amazing Adult Fantasy and its anthology title, but like the Kirby book is Fantastic Four, where it's this singular
Yeah.
story, which is an interesting wrinkle.
I think there's 10 books total in the month. 4 of them aimed clearly at young girl readers. So 40% of your comics readership at this time being young women. And that goes away as the Marvel Universe and the superheroes take over. You see less and less of that.
Right. Super fun, man. Till next week, Jimmy.
Yes.
Let's get out of here.
Yeah, I'm so impressed by how these books look. Man, they're... You know, when you're a kid, you have... I don't want to say misconceptions, but it's not the stuff I was looking for when I'd see a reprint or like a Marvel Masters work or something. And now I go back and see that stuff, and it's just like...
That said,
I just want more of this.
I was scooping up those reprints at Ides, like underneath the stairs.
Yeah.
You know, like the coverless joints and shit like that. I have dozens.
Was that mostly the monster stuff?
Of the
like
monster
creatures?
stuff, yeah.
I love
All
those.
that
Those are
Creatures
some
on
of
the
my
Loose and
favorite
shit.
comics.
Yeah.
And they got
that's what
expensive.
This is. That's what this shit is. It's just reprints of all that crap.
It's so funny. When I started really looking for those, they had already gone up in price.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, those books aren't cheap now, like Creatures on the Prowl.
Yeah.
Monsters on the Prowl, Creatures on the Loose.
Right. Good to go?
Yeah, hit it. Hello and welcome to your favorite YouTube channel, Cartoonist Kayfabe. My name is Jim Rugg.
I'm Ed Piskor.
And I want to remind everybody that we are a daily comic book YouTube channel with over 1,600 videos in our back catalog. And you can search that catalog on the Cartoonist Kayfabe YouTube homepage. You can enter your favorite comic book titles or your favorite creators and see if we've already covered those. I also want to remind everybody that we have a Cartoonist Kayfabe Patreon with different levels that'll get you access to our videos early. And at the King Kayfaber level, you actually can sit in on our recording sessions live, which will give you a real leg up on the Kayfabe effect, as you'll be the first one looking for these books in the aftermarket if you see something you want to add to your collection. So check out our Patreon. There's a link below the video and see which level works for you. All right, today we are looking at Coloring DC. We looked at one of these previously. It was a Bruce Timm Harley Quinn Batman.
Which kind of makes sense. A lot of open lines, like a coloring book, right? Like a
Absolutely.
lot of open areas to color. What makes less sense? Jim Lee.
You know what? That's what I thought too, until I actually flipped through this and found that I really like black and white Jim Lee.
No, I like it too, man. But it's basically, they're capitalizing off the adult coloring book phenomenon that was going on at this certain era. But just as a black and white trade paperback, like you and I would buy it for that. But this was, like we should have known that we would have entered a period of time like we have today, when the adult coloring book phenomenon was going on about 10 years ago, and people were jumping on board with this kind of stuff because it's very wussy.
This opening 2 pages, I think, was done later on after the Hush run. And I note that because I think some of the inking is really interesting, and it's kind of atypical. I think these guys had done a lot of Batman at this point, and could be a sign that it was done quickly, but whatever it is, I like seeing Scott Williams do something a little bit different in some of these marks.
Right.
And you see the homage to the famous Bob Kane. So this cover, probably a lot of readers recognize. What this collects is the first 4 issues of the Jim Lee Batman Hush storyline from, I think, end of 2001, early 2002, which made big waves at the time. I was reading comics news coverage online, and this was a big deal, and I think it sold a ton. And we've looked at the first issue in color, so you can compare it with this. One of the things that I came away with was just the clarity. So much of the line work I find gets lost in the digital coloring and printing.
Right, because it's colored so dark. I think we went through issue 1, and we were commenting about just like how dark everything was and how tough it is to see. But then when you get to pieces like this, see, it's that thing of like, well, I'm glad I'm not the colorist. And it's like, well, guess what? You are now, because you have the coloring book. So now you have to decipher this. And this goes to show, like, there's all these competing lines, and it gets real muddy and confusing. So it's not like the colorist had an easy job.
Right. I would be curious to see. I'm surprised there's not like some famous account or two of somebody that like colors all of this stuff in ways that look really good. Because why not? Somebody's coloring these, or they wouldn't be making them, I think. Although I got it at Ollie's marked down, so maybe nobody is.
Yeah. I mean, it's not even good paper to color. And it feels sacrilegious or something to be coloring this kind of stuff. Like, you can't use any cool materials. Like, it'll just bleed right through.
You would need 2 of them if you were going to do a whole story and color it, I think.
And this would be the challenge, right? Like how do you color that stuff?
Yeah, although I love looking at this because it's a totally different line than what I'm used to with these guys. Imagine them doing a whole story like that. Very interesting. Almost that European line style. This is also the time that Catwoman is just invented. Like the new Catwoman in this cat suit might have been published the same month as this story. Yeah, it was very new at the time. Man, you get to see too how much he's rolling out, like all of these background cities. Straight lines like that.
Yeah,
That's a lot of inking work.
I wonder if you got an assistant to do that kind of stuff.
Yeah, manga style, have your assistants doing backgrounds. Wouldn't be a bad idea. It's funny too to see like super rendering on one figure, and then you see it in black and white, and it's like, oh, interesting. Kind of really stands out against the rest of your page. I was shocked by how different this feels than the color version, and it's bigger. That may have a little bit to do with it too. It might even be full bleed, although I would bet the comic books were full bleed.
Yeah, he was working at it at that level. Trying to bring some Mignola composition into his practice.
I see some Aaron Weisenfeld there too. I always wonder about these guys that ran studios if they weren't taking some from the talent underneath them.
His style definitely changed when J. Scott Campbell got into the mix. Like his chick started to look different.
So I've never read this story before. First time seeing this issue. Batman crashes and burns in the previous issue, and when he wakes up, it is a gang of I guess,
Warlocks.
yeah, like a violent street gang has found him. They're all like 45 years old, which I think is a little different than most street gangs.
I would have maybe
They mean him harm.
thought that would be Art Adams.
Interesting.
Because there's an X Factor issue that Art Adams did that a lot of dudes that look that way.
I also think some of these panels read pretty well big. You know, like that's a pretty dramatic image, and I guess the original art would be even maybe 3 inches bigger. I don't draw a lot of stuff on my pages to that scale.
Right.
All right, so right before these guys can end Batman's life, got to decipher some stuff.
Oof.
Right before they're about to cap him, here comes the Huntress, showing up in what looks like... I see a lot of Spawn going through this.
Interesting.
Right? I mean, it's a homeless gang attacking our hero in the alley, and I mean, this could be the anti-Spawn,
Totally.
Redeemer, whatever that guy's name is.
Both.
You see how well I know my Spawn continuity. And now we're going to have a black and white fight, and I do wonder what people will make of this looking at it on a screen. Is this just indecipherable chaos?
Well, that's why you got to color it. And that's why, like, you know, a person that's coloring, that has a coloring book, it's like, you know, these are going to be purple, and then, like, the outer part will be, like, green. And, like, you know, it's just, you're just looking for fields, open fields to put color. Like, I would love to see what people did with their crayons on this thing.
Yeah. The other part that I see is how, like, certain panels, there is a clear point of interest. You know, if you look on the... even like a small thumbnail, this pops out very clearly as readable. Some of these elements, I think, you can almost see him trying to use black. We're not trying, but using black there to frame a certain sequence or a certain moment or part of the composition. But then other places, it's much harder to decipher. To me, you lose your depth here.
Right.
You know, I understand we're a rooftop looking down at an alley, but I kind of have to look for a minute before I understand that.
Mm-hmm. And that's probably where they're relying on the color to kind of get them over the goal line.
Ooh, man, this makes me think of Steranko's Outland.
Right.
Wonder if there's a little swipe here. I'm not saying for sure I don't totally recognize that composition, but it does remind me of that.
Alfred looks nearly Sean Connery-ish.
Yeah, Alfred is a very moody character in these, according to this rendering line.
Man, dude, this feels like he's back on, like, X-Men Volume 2 era.
Interesting.
Art style, artwork.
I was saying, like, you can see certain Miller homages, you know, cockpits in the Batmobile now and then, you know, to the Dark Knight, which I think is, Jim Lee's talked about that being a huge thing for him. So I feel like that's one that we can see from the Dark Knight Returns. Here's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah, color that.
Yeah, that would
So
be tough.
stupid.
Ink washes. Do you think that Jim Lee's doing the ink washes himself?
I've seen him do it, you know, like on his little drawing tutorials and stuff. He will play. So I don't know, why not?
I'm really happy to see this. It's something we've talked about in past videos where I feel like his work is extremely consistent, and I would like to see him do more of the stuff that you see on whenever he's doing sketches and drawing
says, yeah.
in person. And I feel like this is him playing around a little bit, so glad to see that. But you're right, like when I look at this, it's like that could easily be Wildcats, you know, Volume 1 or something.
Yeah.
That was something at the time that struck me as like, it's almost he hasn't changed as part of the sales point.
Right.
Also, when he simplifies a page like this, one of his better pages in some ways. Very easy to read and follow and interpret. You know, you can hold that one up again, see it as a thumbnail, and I'd still be able to tell you what was happening in that page.
The shading on the Batman's ear, like, that makes a lot of sense. Like, whenever you're drawing Batman, it might not be the first thing that comes to mind, but can you go back one just real, like that kind of thing?
It's pretty good.
It really makes sense.
I didn't even notice that, but I agree with you. I like that. How about this for impossible drawing? We have multiple layers of depth, and then you have a reflection on the guy's like face shield.
Yeah, totally, man. That comes from his Genosha period.
It also, like, this to me is something you do because you know the coloring. Like, you're anticipating what the coloring does.
Right.
Sometimes I'll see that in a finished comic and think, like, how do you draw that? What's that original look like? It just becomes very, I don't know, hard for me to think of keeping straight. How about that for your ear shadowing? Now, it's not solid black, but it's still acknowledged that there's an ear underneath that cowl.
Yeah, but it's more flat. Like you know, we're just looking at that Bernie Wrightson stuff that's giving you all kinds of value, and that's just sort of nothing. Pretty cool to see his work in black and white. Can't lie. But the idea of, like, selling it as a coloring book just diminishes what what this is.
How about this stuff when we get into flashbacks? You see pencil lines in here. That
Right.
first group was almost exclusively, I think, washes or color, watercolor possibly. But here, like, you're seeing some real, I think, graphite showing through.
Looks good on this paper. Like, that could be very, very dicey.
They did figure out how to reproduce line art crisply. You know, you're not getting any of that anti-aliasing on the edges or anything.
Right.
DeLuca effect of a car crash.
Good luck.
Wonder what that looks like in color, you know, because I always think like the back ones, it's almost half background color behind.
Right.
But I don't know if that's actually how they colored.
Yeah, or you just do like a 25% of like whatever the dominant color is.
I'm mildly surprised we don't have an artist edition of this, because we've got a lot of Batman artist editions.
I think there is a Jim Lee something Batman artist edition.
Okay, that would make sense.
Yeah.
I would think that would be a very popular seller. I always love seeing the DeLuca effect. Pretty iconic image. That's one I've seen quite a bit. I feel like, I don't know when Batman Catwoman started, but it's been going strong now for 20 years.
Right.
Also, these pages that have the mixed media. Look at this stuff. All white and your black silhouette plane. Pretty good. Certainly a point of interest. And then as we come down, we get into our mixed media. You know, and that's probably a paste up or whatever, but it's still kind of cool to see it like mashing up together on the same pages and same spreads.
Right.
Black ear. Man, it makes me wonder where that comes from. You think he invented that?
No, I think Neil Adams did. And I think Alex Ross invented that right there. That view.
If Jim Lee is doing this himself, I wonder if he looks at this kind of thing and thinks like, you know, that's one brush stroke
Right.
to do pretty detail, you know, plenty of detail for a skyscraper. But what a difference from like the Scott Williams super heavy rendering, million lines for hatching and grays and stuff.
Yeah, it's true. I seem to remember he did maybe a couple of maybe Gen 13 covers that have like a mixed media, like a David Mack approach, and I seem to remember it's just his name on the cover.
These building backgrounds are freehand. I bet they're ruled in pencil so that you have your straight edge to go on.
Yeah.
But if you look closely, they're freehand and maybe a rapidograph or like a micron or something. It's a uniform weight. Do you see a lot of Scott Williams interviews? You ever come across those?
Not really.
I think it'd be interesting to
I think he's
talk shop with him.
I think he's got Felix, like he's on a Felix podcast or something.
This is fun, you know, going to Metropolis, and I guess Bruce Wayne at this point has bought the Daily Planet. So he shows up and he's, you know, bigwig there.
Kevin McClatchy. Put in your pro-Batman propaganda in the Metropolis paper.
There's this. I thought this was pretty good. So they're on a train, right? And you see, like, again, bring in some different ideas on how you're drawing the buildings going by.
Right.
Not inventing that, but very different than like the static backgrounds that we saw on previous pages. I commend that. You know, figure out ways to try to express whatever it is you're showing in the panels.
Yeah, those backgrounds are so dead though. Like they're just flat out ugly, boring. Like you could just tell that Scott Williams, they're just so uninterested in that stuff in the comics. You know, far more interested in this kind of thing.
Yeah, I gotta imagine this is your moneymaker. This seems like another moment that you're setting something up for your colorist. No eyeball there.
Totally.
Some kind of shadow. Gonna
Right.
Be some
double lighting
effect
or something.
that's going to be done there. Superman, throw some white media on top of him. Maybe even scraping some stuff away. And that's it. So like I said, it's 4 issues that are in here. But kind of cool, man. I picked this up at at Ollie's. I guess I peeled the label off. So it's probably like
$5 or less.
definitely less. It might have been 4. It might have been like $1.99 or something. That's where I got the Bruce Timm coloring book as well. Got to check out Ollie's whenever you pass one, see what kind of books they have in there. Because I don't know that this stuff exists. I don't keep up with Batman publishing. So whenever you see something that's kind of cool, it's usually like that. It's a surprise to me.
Yeah, I got some Bat mangas there. You know, where they reprint the completes. I got the Filth, Grant Morrison.
We looked at the Killing Joke Noir edition, and that came from Ollie's for me. So kind of cool that this stuff exists. Probably an indictment about the current comics sales landscape, that it's completely unknown to me until years later.
Yeah, I mean, this was such a period of time, man. You remember the adult coloring book, and you know, like, I've always, like, I'm a cusp baby, man, and so, like, when I'm in Little League and the kids at T-ball, like their parents aren't letting them eat candy, and they're eating, you know, grapes and raisins, and I'm like, what are these kids gonna fucking grow up to be like? And then I hit a certain age, and those same kids fucking dabble in adult coloring books. I know why. I see how we got here. Good to go?
Yes.
That is so pussy, man. You know how, like, John Waters has a famous quote. He's like, you know, if you're dating somebody and you go over to their house and they don't have books, don't fuck them. And I feel like the amendment should be, if they have adult coloring books, don't fuck them. Let the people know what we're covering, Jimmy.
Darwin Cooke, Catwoman, #1. Lock it in.
Good to go?
Yep. Hello and welcome to your favorite YouTube channel, Cartoonist Kayfabe. My name is Jim Rugg.
I'm Ed Piscor.
And I want to remind everybody, we are a daily comic book YouTube channel with over 1,600 videos in our catalog, and you can search those on our Cartoonist Kayfabe YouTube homepage. Enter your favorite book or your favorite creator, and chances are you'll find something there to enjoy. I also want to remind everybody that part of the way we pay the bills here is Cartoonist Kayfabe Patreon. We have 3 different levels that'll get you access to our videos early, and at the top level, the King Kayfabers, they get access to all of our videos first because they get to sit in on the live recording session, which gives them a very big leg up on the kayfabe effect. Whenever we show a book that people want, it tends to go up in price or disappear in the aftermarket. So if you're a King Kayfaber, you're the first one in line to get that book. All right, so we are looking at Catwoman #1, Ed Brubaker on writing, Darwin Cooke on the penciling, and Mike Allred on the inking team. And I'll tell you, I brought a couple of the other issues. I think there's 4 of these in all. And I was kind of struck right away by how about that for cover design in a time whenever comics are typically put on a wall of other comic books and you want to stand out. I feel like that's a pretty good design that's different than what else is on that, usually a very loud, bright colored wall.
1,000%. And all it takes is going to Barnes & Noble and taking a look at the magazine racks with, you know, proper magazines, and you realize there isn't 50 competing images on the cover of well-designed magazines. It's usually one dominant figure, you know, some spokesmodel or something like that. So, like, that's what they're giving us. And the size of the figure is incredible. Like, if she was standing up, she'd be 3-4 feet tall. Yes. Of an illustration. You know, it feels like fashion artwork.
And even her costume is colored gray. Like, it's almost a black and white cover.
Yeah.
In a world known for 4-color fantasy, this is definitely doing something a little bit different.
Totally.
Darwin Cooke created the logo for this. It was originally lined up, it would have been like Catwoman 96, whatever number the Jim Balance series was on. And whenever they started seeing it, it was like, you know what? This should be a #1. This should be a new series, a new direction. Darwin Cooke also did Selina's Big Score, a graphic novel that he wrote and penciled and inked himself. That's fantastic. We'll have to look at some point. Right around this time, and it was kind of between the previous series and this series, because Catwoman doesn't have the costume yet. She's just like this cat burglar, you know, wears maybe dark clothes and goes out and steals. It's a really fun graphic novel. I remember when the movie came out and was whatever it was, and I thought, why didn't you just adapt Selina's Big Score? Like, it's a crime comic. It would have made almost a perfect transition to the screen. So the series starts up, and he comes on board as penciler for the first story arc, and he's joined by Mike Allred on inks, and I kind of love it. It's a much slicker inking style than what I see when Darwin Cooke inks himself, which I also like. But if you're going to bring somebody on board, I like having something else come in. You know, it's almost like the sum is a little different than the parts.
Yeah. And you know, we going through our Wizard coverage, often I am on the record saying that like Batman Adventures is the most kind of pleasing Batman stories, and I do still agree with that. But at least they brought the art style into like one of the proper canon books, because the art style is updated. Unfortunately, this is still, writing for the trade type stuff. Nothing happens in this comic. Almost zero happens. It's all kind of set up. But Darwin Cooke shines. Great compositions. And it's a lot of stuff. He's doing a lot of things here, man. And it's a lot of like deep foreground, middle ground, background stuff where you see these close hands. You see this sewer grate. So like that's going to have to factor in, and it does. Great color on here.
This was still a very radical style in 2002. Most comics did not look anything like this.
No, not at all. Like, that's what I mean. So to bring this kind of style into proper canon, it sort of it meant a lot, because there was the adventures wing of comics, and then there is the noodly fucking Denny O'Neil wing of Batman comics. So this is totally a transition, and it was noteworthy. Like, Darwin Cooke is getting shine in like Comic Book Artist magazine and shit like that.
Yeah, it's this first storyline is about a serial killer that's killing prostitutes. So you're taking this animated, what we associate with an animated kid's style, and doing a totally opposite, as you say, bringing it into the main universe or whatever. Subject matter wise, it was not what you were used to seeing with this. And to your point about the noodling style, this is about the time of Jim Lee's Hush. Like, they're right around the same time in terms of publication, to give you an idea of the range of those two.
Yeah, no, it's super special stuff, and it felt like Darwin Cooke came out of the scene, like shot out of the cannon, like just straight out of nowhere, doing the guys like Mike Allred and Ty Templeton. They were able to capture that style pretty well, but there's an extra compositional element that Darwin Cooke brings to the table that like a lot of those other guys didn't, and the lettering is interesting to me, because I feel like they cribbed the hand lettering from Gilbert Hernandez.
That's really interesting, because Darwin Cooke would go on to work with him. It's not like they didn't know of one another's work.
Right, and I'm not saying, like, there's a different... It's not Darwin Cooke doing the lettering here.
No,
it's some other guy gets the credit, but I swear to God, like, those fonts and stuff like that, like, that slim, semi-italic, I swear that's Gilbert.
One of the things that stands out to me, I was mildly disappointed in this first issue and ended up reading second and third and really liking them more. It's almost like he finds his footing, and there's some establishing stuff. One of the establishing things is the transition from the previous Catwoman version.
Right, yeah.
And you see that here, like she's dreaming, and then she's talking to a psychiatrist about these dreams and what they all mean. And you'll see a tight 8-panel grid, right?
Yeah.
Pretty easy to read, even if you don't read any of the captions.
And by the way, that was established by Bruce Timm in the Batman Black and White to, like, use that style with the 8-panel grid, like, in that sort of format.
Yeah, it's fantastic. You don't see the 8-panel grid nearly as much as like a 6-panel and a 9-panel, and I love it whenever it shows up, and I think he's a master of it.
It's such a cool thing to compose with.
We leave our session, and now we still have those 4 tiers, but it's no longer perfect pieces. We're out in the real world. It's kind of a fallen world. Gotham still has a lot of crime on the streets, right? We're offering drugs and what you need here as soon as she leaves, and I feel like that's one of those really subtle storytelling pieces that's done in your panel sizes and layouts. And I mention it because there's a bunch of that stuff that Cooke does. Like, he does these directional devices. We're going to see these manhole covers throughout, and there'll be panels where it's really prominent, but also panels where there's just a long shot.
Right.
On its own, you don't think too much of it, but reading the entire story, it's going to come up again and again.
Really reducing the background elements to like bare essentials, and it's so perfect, man. Like in true animator fashion, just like pulling out all the most important lines. And I think of that with Allred as well. Like, I wonder what Allred got out of this, because I think that he probably learned a couple of things from Darwin Cooke.
Interesting that we do a gutter there at an angle, which I guess is leading into our flashback, and you get a little bit of Batman Year One,
exactly,
a nod there.
I feel like if it wasn't this art team on this, you have nothing here. Like, just what Brubaker put in this is not enough to keep you coming. It really is like enjoying Darwin Cooke's artwork that kind of would make me buy the next issue.
The coloring is very gray, and I think that's intentional because towards the end of the issue they make a comment about the she's operating in the gray area that Batman operates in black and white.
You know what, dude? I was looking at it on digital. I think it's the paper. Like, I mean, I'm sure that there's like some
It
little thing going on,
desaturates it some,
but it is way more poppy and stuff. On let me see if I still have it.
it's always going to be more poppy with that backlit.
I'm saying,
but it's literally written
noticeable
by the writer as like calls this world gray.
yeah.
How about that for drawing you'd never see in a Marvel DC superhero comic?
Right.
Man, and I feel like there are so many of these little nods to a Batman Year One. You know, I think of Batman kicking down that pillar in Batman Year One whenever he's trapped by the police and he's causing a cave-in. It's exactly this moment, you know? You're not aping that panel, but I do think you're playing some of the hits. And why not? I also like that weird proportions of the head that appear a lot in this version.
It's almost Paul Pope's.
Yeah.
You know, was Paul Pope's out at this point?
I don't know when that comes out.
But also, in the cartoon, they started to fool around with that, too.
Yeah,
Around
yeah, it's a
that time.
cartoon-ism.
But you know what it is? It's an evolution of the Bob Kane, like Bill Finger Batman.
Yeah, like a throwback.
Exactly. Which is what you see on the front cover, I think, of these books. Like, this right there.
Mm.
You know, that's the Bob Kane face.
I think Chip Kidd did a logo redesign for a bunch of the books. I don't know if it's that time, but that little logo kind of reminds me of that. There are also action sequences that remind me of storyboarding.
Totally. Like this comes to mind.
This is your Rambo, suit up. So this is going to be our first glimpse of the new, well, besides the cover, the first glimpse of the new Catwoman costume. And part of this story is, she's evolving into this other character, so you get a different costume. No tail on this one. Has a run-in with Batman, trying to figure out exactly what she's doing. And this, again, those proportions, something that Paul Pope carries over into his Batman
It's
work.
true.
I think he takes over with the Catwoman covers, starting with issue 5.
Paul Pope?
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. You feel the leather, the way that they shade that. Man, he could build a figure, huh?
He's so good at animating that figure moving around.
And it's so solid too. Like the exact like blacks on this area, like you feel the volume of her butt cheek and stuff.
Takes advantage of whenever he does break some of the panels out. It's still 4-tier grid, but we're using the splash page there to kind of show her off. That's what you want too. First shot in the new costume, give us a money shot.
Yeah. Give us something.
Yeah, a lot of setup here. So Holly, also from Batman Year One, shows up. This was a safe house. She thought Selina was dead. Everybody thinks Catwoman was dead, and she's the one that tells Selina that there's a serial killer killing prostitutes. And that's the end of the first issue. Is Selina learning that this is your car where the prostitute killer is operating from. I did want to showcase a couple of choice sequences from subsequent issues. So again, start the same thing, 8-panel grid. But now, this is a big wordless action sequence as Selina is infiltrating the police headquarters because she wants to get a look at some of the evidence on these dead prostitutes and figure out what she can tell. What has not come out yet, so you see use of like silhouettes running across the top of a train. And tell me that stuff wouldn't be a storyboard.
Oh, totally. Then 16 panels.
Another good money shot. And this sequence really impressed me of just even the space to put in, find a spot where the credits will go. But you see like the silhouettes as she's like running up and climbing over the top of the building. Even something like this that's kind of a decorative splash page, you still have readable storytelling.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he's, as you say, I feel like, he had tried to break into comics, and the story is they lost one of his samples for years.
Right.
So, I think it's a guy who really wanted to do this and instead ended up in animation honing his chops. And then when he gets a chance, it does feel like he's fired out of a cannon, not just for Catwoman, but for everything that he's doing.
Absolutely. Yeah, just pure comics here.
Yeah, you can really see her coming in, even tricking the police, like getting them, lulling them out and then infiltrating through a vent. Like, easy for us to understand. You've seen that in movies before, but pretty well done here, and it happens very quickly. By the way, Dark Knight Strikes Again ad in here, so kind of quite a time period. How about this? Pretty good layout for a splash page or page 1, especially after 2 8-panel grids. And again, use of color here really pops.
Yeah, the colorist is definitely noteworthy.
Yeah, I wonder how much the creative team, if they're all working together on that. But again, to me, it feels like Darwin Cooke just really figuring out what he wants to do and going for it. I think even like the splash, double page splash, you're seeing like more adventure. Maybe a note that they were starting to get from the audience or from an editor or somebody of like, let's go a little bit harder, a little more dynamic. And maybe it's just storytelling. If you were to read this in collection, I wonder if it is something that just builds in intensity as the story goes on.
I'm sure it does, man, but it's making no use of the format of comic books to play that game. Get $10 into it before you get to the real heart. Like, nah, man, you got to make each issue a complete unit.
I think that Cooke and Allred would cross paths again around this time at Marvel with some of the X-Force and spin-offs and stuff. Jay Bone comes on a couple of those, but I think Darwin Cooke does a Goop or Zoop or...
Is that true?
Loop. Well, it might not be true. I think so, but I could be wrong about that because I associate Jay Bone with Darwin Cooke, and I think he does some of that stuff. But I feel like Cooke does something, maybe a Wolverine dupe thing.
I'm so out of it at this point for sure. Like, man, I think about 2002. I got a proper job, and you know what I'm doing? I'm scooping up these Lone Wolf and Cubs. I'm reading Sandman for the first time. I think the Astro Boys are being serialized in $10 a month.
Mm-hmm.
So like that's what I've so divorced from Marvel DC Comics probably for nearly 7 years at this point, probably.
Yeah, these are things I came to later. I was also out, and I was out. One of the major reasons was the writing for the trade. Life is picking up at that point. 2002, It's like, at that point, the internet is pretty much up and running. There's just so much going on. And the idea that, like, I got to remember, like, 3 months ago what happened in this comic book.
Right.
It just became not fun for me to read. And I know a lot of people who had that similar... I've had this conversation with people who, they still had their pull list.
Right.
And it's almost a habit as opposed to like, oh yeah, I'm getting the juice from it that I used to get.
Right.
And like for me, the juice had fallen off.
Totally.
And I blamed some of that like just elongated storytelling.
Yeah. When stuff like the Ice Haven issue of 8 Ball is coming out at this time, it's like it's hard to compete.
Yeah, I agree.
Good to go?
I am.
All right, man. Paul Auster's City of Glass by Paul Karasik and Dave Mazzucchelli. I'm going to relock that in just out of paranoia. Here, why don't you take it down just so that we have the depth. Cool. Good if you are.
No, let me zoom in. Shit.
Oh, yeah.
My bad. It's a little book.
Yeah.
Don't need to get more of those notes about zooming in. All right, lock that one in.
Good?
Yep. Hello and welcome to your favorite YouTube channel, Cartoonist Kayfabe. My name is Jim Rugg.
I'm Ed Piscor.
I want to remind everyone we are a daily comic book YouTube channel with over 1,600 videos in our back catalog, and you can search for those by your favorite title or creator at the Cartoonist Kayfabe YouTube homepage. I also want to remind everybody that we have a Cartoonist Kayfabe Patreon that helps pay the bills and keep the lights on around here. We have 3 different levels that will get you access to our videos early, and at the King Kayfaber level, you will be the first one to see our videos because you can sit in on the live recording session every week. It'll give you a leg up on the Kayfabe effect whenever we cover a book, maybe like Paul Auster's City of Glass that you want to add to your collection. You'll be the first one looking for it before these videos go wide. That means you can get the copies that are available at the best prices, and sometimes these books completely disappear from the aftermarket after one of our videos goes up. So check out the Patreon, see which level suits you best. All right, Paul Auster's City of Glass, part of the Neon Lit imprint. This is something that Art Spiegelman, series designer, credited here. I feel like he had some editorial input as to like what was being done, maybe putting together the creative teams, because I would read, probably in the Comics Journal, some information on this series. A lot of indie alternative cartoonists, darlings contributed, but I think only 2 or 3 books actually came out.
Right.
There were a few others in the works that didn't necessarily see print, at least not in this form, but kind of a neat experiment.
He shepherded a lot of stuff because he had his wing at Pantheon where you would get hard-boiled defective stories, and I think there might have been a Gary Panter book or two. And this is Avon Books. And it got me thinking, like, there was a publisher called Avon, like a comics publisher in like the 50s.
I believe they published the first graphic novel. It was an Arnold Drake and who's the cartoonist from here that was a cheesecake artist?
Yeah, Matt Baker.
Matt Baker on art. I forget the name of it. Dark Horse did a reprint of it. I don't know whether there are connections between those two publishers. Wouldn't surprise me. A lot of the publishers,
it's the same Avon.
Yeah, a lot of publishers had kind of different wings. Should also say this is an adaptation credited to Paul Karasik and David Mazzucchelli. Paul Karasik, in his own right, a good cartoonist, bit of a historian, teacher, all the comics stuff. These are a bunch of people, Mazzucchelli, Karasik, and Spiegelman, that I think of as like formalists when it comes to comics.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is what I was saying in our weekly, where if you have like tremendous success in the medium of comics, Mazzucchelli in this instance with a couple of Frank Miller projects, certainly Batman Year One, which is kept in print perpetually, and Daredevil Born Again, which gets reprinted quite often. He's still spending money from 1986. So, as a tithe in the religion of comics, do something like this, man. Like, I think it's a great instinct where this ain't making no money. This ain't shit. They're totally capitalizing off of Art Spiegelman's name to just even have this stuff made. And Spiegelman, with his success of Mouse, it's like, yeah, let's do some formal stuff. Let's fuck off. I spent like a month with Paul Karasik in Denmark, and he's calling up dudes. Like, I think he lives in Martha's Vineyard. He's calling up dudes and it's like, yeah, as soon as I get back to America, like, I got this meeting with a billionaire to like get some. Is he with the Center for Cartoon Studies or something?
I don't think so.
There was some school thing that he was like getting funding from like a billionaire dude. So this is all big Willie Rich dudes that could take a flyer and work on a comic formally that ain't going to receive no financial rewards probably. And what you get is a lot of cool ideas, man.
Exactly. Karasik, I give him credit for Fletcher Hanks, the 2 Fletcher Hanks collections that Fantagraphics put out. I think he was kind of the guy that actually shepherded that stuff together.
Dude, yeah, he told me the story that like when he was with, because he was a student at SVA under Art Spiegelman. So he's there with Mark Newgarden and those guys. And when Raw starts to form, it was that dude, Jerry Moriarty, the Jack Survives guy, who's like, you got to see this, like, these old comics, these, like, Stardust the Space Wizard comics. Like, it was Jerry Moriarty. Like, I feel like of all those guys, he would be the last guy you would think.
Yeah, I didn't realize that was the guy connected to that.
Would be fucking with those comics. But yeah, like, that's how he got introduced.
Is he also the co-author of How to Read Nancy?
Yeah.
With Mark Newgarden?
Newgarden, yeah.
Okay, so, yeah, clearly a formalist when it comes to comics. One last note is this is an adaptation of Paul Auster's City of Glass, a very New York piece. That's, the New York trilogy here is what you see that collects City of Glass. It was the first book in this kind of like 3-part trilogy.
That's a Spiegelman cover.
And yeah, there you go. The City of Glass story is a mystery writer gets a phone call looking for someone else and ends up getting sucked into this, like, his own mystery where it's kind of like a PI, a detective novel. And it's dissecting those tropes is kind of the way I think of this book, because this is a strange book to read. It's definitely open-ended in that you and I will probably have totally different ideas on what this story is and it's about.
Yeah, and the story, frankly, it doesn't matter that much. This is so influenced by Mouse. Like, the graphic design of this, the way this is laid out, it's the Art Spiegelman approach to graphic design. But I think Mazzucchelli, for his, like, art style here, all of the implements that he uses to draw and everything, I think he's using, like, the Mouse art supplies and shit. Like, it's the same format of a book. He's using the same kind of deadline that Spiegelman used. And I think he's like, he saw what Art was doing and is like, let me try to apply that to my own comics. Like, we have interviews with him when we looked at, like, the first issue of Comics Journal that we did that had McFarlane on the cover. There was a Mazzucchelli interview in there. And he's talking about like wanting to be a part of Raw. So this is like his way to kind of be a part of that, and it's almost funny to me because it's like just constant zoom outs, and then you see what the thing really is.
Yeah, it calls to mind when we've seen like a giant fingerprint, and it's Dick Tracy and it's Johnny Craig, the
Yeah.
one EC comic, or the first things that come to my mind in comics, which makes sense if you're doing, let's do a visual version of dissecting the mystery novel genre and its tropes. And so there's a lot of attention to the visual language that's used, and I've seen interviews, and again, I can't remember if it's Mazzucchelli or Karasik that talks about like 6 or 7 drawing styles that are used. And again, it's this idea of representation and what do these different marks mean? Do we read them differently? Do we see them differently?
Right,
exactly.
Another thing that I pulled from this is when, in understanding comics, Scott McCloud is like laying out the different ways that you could tell stories, and it would be like, the second to second kind of situation. But then there would be like, moment to moment. Then there would be the storytelling vibe where it would be like these like it would be panels with images that feel completely disparate, but it's the words that kind of tie them together. And there's a lot of that storytelling here. So there's so much to learn in terms of how to tell a story in comics from this exact book, because that would be the hardest stuff to think of whenever you're looking at the Scott McCloud shit when he's laying out the different kinds of storytelling styles. Because it's like, how do you get a pack of cigarettes and somebody on the phone to like become a single unit, So like this is chock full of examples for that, and I think it's worth reading like specifically for that, because I do think like in terms of the story, you got to be in the mood for something like this, man.
Yeah. You see this kind of formal play too.
Yeah.
There's a thought balloon, but we don't know what he's thinking about. And it's classic comics tropes, right? Like here's our DeLuca lighting a cigarette and shaking out the match. Beautiful drawing, though. This is a really tightly drawn comic in a lot of ways, and I think it has to do with using the imagery and thinking about what does the line weight mean? What does this different drawing style mean? Because you go from these things that are relatively literal translations of the real world, representational art, to abstract stuff in the same page.
I swear to God, man, like, was it like Love Eats Brains or something like what Dash Shaw had stuff like this exactly happening? And I think he was probably at SVA being taught underneath Mazzucchelli.
Yeah, I'm very confident Mazzucchelli was one of his instructors. But it is, like you see, like how far do you push this, right? Like we're going inside of this guy now, and now we're going inside of language history. In some weird ways, there are parallels to Scott McCloud's Understanding Comics, where he's talking about the history of how visual language evolves. There are versions of this here, like reference to cave painting marks. And even references to the idea of media and how the stuff gets filtered.
Right.
I love this kind of stuff on that level. Like, I like genre deconstruction, and this is probably one of the most aggressive genre deconstructions I can think of in comics. Comics within comics, always
Right.
a fun trope. You can see like the page. Makes me think of some of Tom Scioli's biographies, where like you'll see like the Sunday newspaper all laid out,
Right.
and I think it's such an attractive visual. But even like the icons calls to mind things like Ivan Brunetti's syllabus, where he's like, all right, here's 20 squares and you're going to draw a car in 20 seconds without reference. What does that actually mean? And you can kind of see a lot of ideas on these pages.
Yeah,
9-panel grid, or is that a jail cell?
Yeah. Like Mazzucchelli's formal play is super strong, and you wonder like the division of labor.
That is something that I think is worth noting, because that has come up. I've definitely read about that, where like we all think, oh, it's Mazzucchelli. I think Karasik's a little bit more involved in the visuals here than we may give him credit.
For like the layouts and stuff.
Yeah, and even concept. It's such a weird story. Paul Auster, who is the writer of the original story, is a character within this.
Right.
And there's a lot of talk in other writing about his story that, that's not Paul Auster. That's totally a character that just happens to have his name.
Right.
So there are those elements too, where you're really shifting around. You have two writers intersecting, and both of them playing detective in essentially a mystery book. Layers on layers,
Right.
as another cartoonist might say. But see, like this kind of stuff is drawing where it's diagram. It's not a door, but we all see a door there. It's just a couple of rectangles. Almost like the iconography you'd see on a bathroom label. Road signs. Parking signs have that kind of stuff. So it's definitely a like a comic book. I don't know, a Rosetta Stone or something.
Right.
But almost a reverse, where it's like you would come out of this more confused probably than with answers, but it's still a chance to just kind of play with some of these elements in ways that most comics certainly don't. It feels very European, some of the art.
Yeah. It's like it's not really about the story. This thing, man, it really is a textbook on like ways that you could push the medium of comics to tell the stories that you want. And I think that I sort of go back and forth, but like where I'm at in my mind right now, I say risk pretense and try some things and see if it works or doesn't. Like, who gives a fuck how people receive it, or like, if they roast you on the Comics Journal website or some shit like that. Give it a shot.
I agree 100%, and I think there's even a lowbrow version of that where you go, they're just not precious. Get it right on tomorrow's page.
Right.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%. This is pretty neat as showing a couple of those different drawing pieces, and then whenever you see like, okay, now we're mimicking the human head with a street light. This is your outlet in Scott McCloud's Understanding Comics that look like a human face.
Right. Yeah, all this stuff, and that's breaking down the face into the simple shapes. That's what I mean. Like, it's very adjacent to Understanding Comics, and like you read Understanding Comics and you get some like initial concepts and things, and then you go into this thing. But once again, like, you have to be in the mindset to be ready for this kind of thing. Because if you're just coming off of reading your issue of Will Spartacio's Iron Man, like this is an adjustment.
Yes, that is an adjustment. I love like his drawing. Like when he's drawing absolutely. Like a study. Because of the format of this book, and maybe the originals for all I know, they're these little panels, but the drawing is so freaking good. Like when he's drawing a New York street, it's unassailable, and I don't know that you could simplify it much more than what he does in some of these scenes.
Absolutely.
And that's the heart of it for me. Like, that's the stuff we often will say, like, oh, drawing the inside of this grocery store, and like, how would Toth draw an aisle of groceries?
Right.
I feel like Mazzucchelli does that in here.
He is on Rubber Blanket.
This is one of your keys, too, I think, to deciphering this book, this Tower of Babel.
Right.
Again, it's just language is really what we're studying here.
Yeah, totally. He is, in his credits, like, Rubber Blanket is mentioned, so this isn't exactly like a Cro-Magnon stage or nothing. Like, no. He's already in that mindset.
Even something like a map is a form of drawing.
Sure.
It's one more example of like how many different types of drawings can we put in here. And some of the drawings remind me a lot of the Rubber Blankets. Like he's at that stage. This is 1994 publication, so I don't know when those ran, but it's early like all 3 issues may be done by this point is what I'm saying. Right. There might be one more coming out. I'm not sure exactly. This is fun too because that's almost like your comic strip. In a way, that's your Dick Tracy.
Right.
Really heading towards iconography. While meanwhile, this is again the representational drawings. Like.
Yeah, a big part of that is his use of black. Is like he just knows exactly where to put that stuff to kind of keep the eye trained. When he starts to stalk the guy, he'll use like a little trail to show how he's following the dude and stuff. We might be coming up on one of those pieces.
This is pretty great too, and I can't help but think of Kriegstein a little bit in Master Race, the idea of showing like movement through these scattered panels, but he's now doing it with these various drawing pieces,
right,
all starting to crush into each other. And he goes in and out. When a crowd gets off of the subway, are they cartoons? Are these people? Like there's details that are observed. Has to choose which of these guys is he following. Like he's a Shamus on a mission here, but he doesn't have a lot of info, and he's not sure which of his guys he's after. You see Asterios Polyp in many of these pages, too.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, this is the newest book before Asterios Polyp.
Is that right? Yeah, I guess so.
And Asterios Polyp comes way later.
Yeah, you can imagine that the idea is...
See that little trail, and it makes sense. Like, there's emotion in that, because there's, like, a hesitation right there.
I love something like this. Talking on the phone, and the outside of the phone booth is one thing, and the inside's your silhouette.
Absolutely.
Almost an abstract drawing, if that's all you had to go with.
And look at how much mark making is in there, but still very clear.
Yeah, exceptionally clear. And the deadline that you talk about, and for people that don't know what we mean by that, it's not the thin,
that's
thick, thin. Yeah, right. It's not the thin, thick, thin that we see polished in a lot of stuff like Charles Burns or Joe Sinnott. but it's this like a chunky.
I mean, he's
Chunky line.
He coined the deadline term. In fact, that's how we know that Dashaw was
Yes.
under his instruction, because like it is Mazzucchelli who coined that term, dumb line or deadline.
Able to do a form with very few lines.
It's so remarkable. Like, you know, a black plane for that sidewalk. Like, there's so much value in shading and stuff in there. Like a bunch of different grays.
I'm looking up here to see if there's any credited letterer, and then it makes me wonder, like...
I think it's just Mazzucchelli, man.
Pretty impressive. You don't see a lot of that. You know, I guess cartoonists do that whenever they're, like, alternative cartoonists, but, you know, this is such an odd object, and he's coming out of kind of a different background, but...
It was a big mystery. Like I knew that this existed, probably... Actually, maybe I even heard about it because of From Mysterious Polyp or something, but it was, like... It was never in the comic shop, like... Who knows where the fuck this thing came out?
I got mine at Borders.
Yeah, there it is.
How about that for, again, just playing with these different types of drawings, you know, and that's almost like that free line kind of abstract drawing.
Right.
You think at some point they're sitting down thinking about this book, talking about this book, and it's like literally, how many ways can you think of drawing?
Totally. Or just like, because every page has a little something going on, and it's like, how do you get a little bit of business on every page?
And so what this is, he's following this guy around trying to figure out, like, what's his plan. He's been released from prison.
This is so wild.
They're afraid he's going to kill this kid. And so that's his job, is to protect this kid. And so he's just following this dude, can't figure out what's going on with him, starts drawing the path the guy walks. Literally following him through the streets, and then come home and draw this stuff. And then what are these paths? Are they letters? Let's look at them all together. It's great. Like, for a detective comic, it's such a great concept, because how do you do detective shit visually? You know, you can do the film noir, that's part of it, you can do the figures walking around and interacting, but how do you represent like a guy's thought process?
Right. Check this out, man. The layers of like white on top of black, on top of white, on top of black, on top of white, like several layers of depth, tons.
Yeah, I think of Kikuo, who we talked to.
Yeah, who is another student of Mazzucchelli's, by the way.
Yeah, I see like some of the stuff in the compositions, and it just reminds me of some of his ideas. Yeah. You know, and he still has that superhero stuff. You know, this high angle looking down at a couple guys on a park bench.
He's able to draw that stuff. See, like the guys, like the New Yorker guys, like Karasik and shit, who draw in like New Yorker style. They can't draw that other stuff. Because, like, they arrived at a style that is commensurate to, like, their full capabilities. But, like, we know what Mazzucchelli can do. He could do the full-on shit. And then he's whittled his style down. He's pared his very intense drawing style down into cartoon language, which is different than what those other guys can do very often.
Let me read a couple of excerpts here to give a little further idea of how much this is a language thing. So this is looking at like a scribbled drawing of a broken umbrella, and the caption is, "When an umbrella breaks and you get wet, is it still an umbrella? It has changed, but the word is the same. It is imprecise false." So that's what this dude does, is this crazy dude who was locked up for a while, he invents words that will correspond with things. It's a great piece too, because once you start to study like foreign language or old languages, you start to find out like, oh, you know, this language has 9 words for this thing that we have 1 word for. Mm-hmm. And you start to understand like the concept of translation is not like a one-to-one thing. That was really abstract for me as a kid. Like, I just thought, oh, they're just different words.
Like
for
it's
the
a
same
cryptogram.
Thing. Yeah, and it's not at all.
No.
But again, how do you draw that? You do it with eggs being boiled to different degrees. Yeah, it's a pretty fantastic piece, and it is somewhat dry material until you give it to people who are masters of figuring out how to bring visuals to it. And it's like every trick you can think of. There are silhouette panels, there are diagrammatic panels. It's just every way you can think of to bring these concepts to life. You know, a cityscape, but it's all in bricks.
Yeah, like Mazzucchelli, he's the only guy to sort of bridge the gap between straight up mainstream superhero comics and really like formalistic, abstract kinds of comics. Because like that's what this is, man. Yeah, you give this, it's dry material, and unless you give it to another cartoonist to read. Like, I just don't think that some average bear who's going to read this on the streets will give a fuck at all about what
I would be curious about people who are big mystery fans and how they would you know, if this would make sense to them, you know, if it would be something that would be enjoyable to a mystery fan that's not necessarily interested in the visual play that goes on here. You know, and they're constantly representing. Now we're seeing images on a television set, right? You're sitting there and you're watching games. It's just one more piece of that visual information. It's wild. It's really an interesting comic. Again, as you say, I think with no visual interest, this may not do it for you. But then there's also, you can just enjoy the drawing. He draws hands throughout this thing, and they are perfect.
Heck of a brush slinger.
Yes. Yeah. Interesting piece. Again, how do you represent motion? This is time passing. This guy's now just sitting, observing this apartment to see if the guy comes or goes. He's lost his, the mouse that he's been chasing, he's lost. So he just sets up camp. And time is going to pass, an indeterminate amount of time. But how do you show that visually? That could almost be the Photoshop tricks or the photocopy tricks, you know, where people would drag a drawing across a photocopier and get some weird effects.
Yeah, I mean, it might be.
So if you like Mazzucchelli, and this is a book that you have not seen or are unfamiliar with, definitely worth seeking out. Like, the guy doesn't have a lot of books in his catalog, and I think every one of them is worth looking at and reading. You know, they're all very interesting, and this one weirdly might be the most interesting.
As a maker of comics, I do think that that everybody who makes comics should really give this a shot, because the way that we do our comics, like, more often than not, is just that moment to moment, very clear. You know, the rule used to be treat your reader like they're stupid, and just like kind of drive the point home visually. But this gives you some tools, man, to kind of like expand your storytelling possibilities and sensibility. So you know, it is a textbook of sorts. You know, I feel like they might have pulled from Chester Brown.
I think so too. Yeah, I think so too. I was looking through his Gospels recently, and they are kind of. We've looked at Chester Brown Autobio where he tapes his panels together.
Right.
Works great for a 6-panel grid. But then he'll have those pages that are like this, where the panels are just scattered. And I wonder, how does he assemble those pages? Does he have like a backboard that he like tapes them in a non-gridded way to it? But yes, if you are, you know what, this may mostly be Paul Karasik, because this feels like stuff that I've seen him do.
Right.
I would say too, if you are a maker or an aspiring cartoonist, you could take this book apart and find almost everything that you could possibly bring to a black and white page is in this comic. Even at the end there, you see where the panels are starting to fall off of the grid and stuff. So yeah, a lot of reason to explore this. And I read this when you went to Japan. That's how we ended up getting this back into circulation. I reread it, I should say.
Right.
You know, and I've read like the novella that it's based on. I'm very interested in the story. I'm very excited that it exists. And it's pretty interesting. We looked at Bernie Wrightson's Frankenstein, and we talked about how that's created outside of the paycheck, you know, the commercial art part of his life.
Right.
And in some ways, like, that's kind of what this feels like. You know, they probably got a little advanced, but as you say, Mazzucchelli's getting royalties at this point from Batman and some big work that's being reprinted. Why not do this? Why not explore those artistic things that are pulling you? Make this stuff. You know, if you have that, it's a real gift. And if you're creative, like, give us a glimpse of that, you know? Right.
And like I said, man, I think that's like, he has such respect for the medium of comics if that's a sacrifice. Like, he could be doing job work and making big money as much as he wants. Like, there's not one publisher who would not publish his work, but to like sit down and really like do something so thoughtful and meditative. You don't want comics to just be this, because then you turn comics to poetry, and only, you know, it's just because this is comics for other cartoonists. I don't think that this is for anybody else, like, outside of the thing. You know, I don't know what they would get from it at all, but to have some very thoughtful people make comics of this kind of persuasion, I do think that it is a stepping stone into like new forms of storytelling that like other young cartoonists can like absorb and apply to their own practice in you know, in their own ways. Like, this is formal play for formal play's sake, which relegates it to like a niche, but you can do formal play in a more populist work that, you know, can have great success.
I am very curious now if Scott McCloud has talked at all about Mazzucchelli's, either this book or Asterios Polyp, because I do think that they cross over some common ground from
Sure.
different angles.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think McLeod is such an articulate speaker on comics. I'd be curious if he has written or spoken about these works, because I think he'd have interesting stuff to say.
You know how we talk about the kayfabe effect and the King Kayfabers get in early on this stuff, man? I'm seeing people in the chat room already that say he snapped up a copy for $5 shipped as of us recording this video.
I'll tell you what, you get this book for $5, carry it around with you, read it on your commute. That's a really good $5 spent. You know, like, you're going to get something out of this that you're not going to get out of any other comic.
Agreed, man. Good to go?
Yes.
Shoot some commercials?
Yeah.
I'll start showing off some pages.
Do you have an order you want these in?
Maybe hip hop first. Some more of them shits. Switchblade first.
And you're up first this time?
I just don't remember.
It doesn't matter too much. Just reverse the order for the end shoot.
Yeah. And you could hand those pages off to me. I didn't scan them yet, so let me know when you're good. Good.
This video is brought to you by the comics that we make. Ed Piskor's Switchblade.
Shorties. It's being serialized online.
Stop that.
Good to go?
Yeah. This video is brought to you by the comics that we make. Ed's Switchblade Shorties is now being serialized daily on your social media of choice. These are samples of some of the strips that will be coming up in the future. You can also pick up now Hip Hop Family Tree, the Omnibus. The Omnibus collection of all 4 years of... Fuck. Stop that.
Good if you are.
Yeah, hit it. This video is brought to you by the comics that we make. Ed Piskor's Switchblade Shorties is now being serialized on all of our social media every single day. You can see a sample of some of the upcoming storylines here. You can also pick up Hip Hop Family Tree, the Omnibus, collecting all 4 volumes of the Hip Hop Family Tree in one handsome hardcover edition, along with 140 extra pages, including lots more art, comics, and notes. Red Room Crypto Killers, the 3rd volume in the Red Room series, will be coming out in January, but you can read the Red Room series in any order. These are all self-contained stories. Oops, I forgot. You're not supposed to flip through this one on YouTube. X-Men Grand Design, the trilogy trade paperback, is now available, collecting all 3 seasons of the X-Men Grand Design story in one handsome volume. My latest comics, Street Angel Princess of Poverty and Deadliest Girl Alive, collect all of my Street Angel comics in 2 handsome books from Image Comics. That is The Homeless Ninja on a Skateboard. I've also been self-publishing some comics and zines lately. True Crime Funnies, 3 nonfiction stories, BW zine celebrating the black and white explosion, and the 1986 zine celebrating the greatest year in comics history. You can get those on jimrugg.com or patreon.com/jimrugg. And my Hulk Grand Design. This collection, the Treasury Oversized Edition, one of my proudest books, available now in very limited quantities as it is out of print. But a new collection of trade paperback of Hulk Grand Design will be available in May this year from Marvel, so start pre-ordering that one now. And now back to our video. You want me to shoot the ending?
Yeah, we're here. Good to go?
Yep.
Kayfabers, like, follow, subscribe to the YouTube channel, hit the bell so that we could notify you when new videos are available. We are a daily YouTube channel with more than 1,600 videos at your disposal. We might have talked about your favorite comics. Go on the front page of the Cartoonist Kayfabe YouTube channel, hit the magnifying glass, search for your favorite titles, check out those episodes. But if we did not cover your favorite comics, just let us know in the comments and we will push those comics a little bit higher on our to-read pile. We have a Patreon where the King Kayfabers mitigate the kayfabe effect by getting in early. They get all the videos before anybody else. And, if you're awake, available, and at a computer or some sort of online device, you get to hang out with us in the live stream recording session that we are doing. And we've got about 50 people in there right now, Jimmy. So it's small, it's intimate, it's private, but they're also the people getting the comics before anybody else has the option to do so. Ultimately, the videos are brought to you by the books that we make. You don't buy our books, we can't make videos, man. Can't keep the lights on in the studio. So before you is a smattering of the books that we have out there. But let's get into the details. Jimmy, what do you have?
Hulk Grand Design. This is the Treasury Collection that is actually out of print. If your store still has one of these and you don't, you want to scoop that up. But good news, Marvel is reprinting this for a May release this year. It will be a trade paperback format, so kind of the mass media version or the mass market version, and you can pick that one up. You can pre-order that one now wherever you buy books or comics. I have also been self-publishing some zines and mini comics, the BW zine celebrating the Black and White Explosion, the 1986 zine celebrating the greatest year in comics, and True Crime Funnies, 3 nonfiction stories, a couple of wrestling stories in addition to your typical true crime kind of crime comic. You can get those on jimrugg.com or patreon.com/jimrugg. And my latest book releases, Street Angel Princess of Poverty and Street Angel Deadliest Girl Alive, collecting the adventures of the homeless ninja on a skateboarder. We have a full color version and we have some of the original comics as they originally appeared in black and white. Those are both now available from Image Comics.
I'm doing a new experiment for 2024. I'm serializing daily comic strips on all my social media, including the Cartoonist Kayfabe social media. It's called Switchblade Shorties. These are some of the more recent strips that I drew. Have yet to scan them in and get them to look like they will in their final book publication. But hit any of my social media up for that, and you could check out Switchblade Shorties that way. I'll put videos out on Saturdays on the Kayfabe channel with reading the week's prior Switchblade comics. X-Men Grand Design Trilogy trade paperback collects all the X-Men Grand Design comics that I did. This is the third round of Red Room comics in trade paperback form. It's called Crypto Killers, and it comes out January 14th. So scoop that comic up sooner than later. There's a limited number of those out there, and there are also a limited number of the Hip Hop Family Tree omnibus books out there right now. It's been climbing on the Amazon charts in a big way the past couple of weeks. I've seen it on a lot of people's Instagram stories when the holidays came through. So we got a very nominal amount of these books left. Scoop them up if you see them. It's the best book I made with a lot of extras that give you a reason to buy the book beyond if you have those original volumes. Like I said before, the books are the most important way to keep the channel rocking, but there are some direct ways to support the Cartoonist Kayfabe channel. Jimmy, if you'll let the people know.
Subscribe to the Cartoonist Kayfabe e-newsletter at the links below this video. You can also find Cartoonist Kayfabe t-shirts, merchandise, hats, and more at our spread shop. That link is also under this video.
There you have it. All the ways to support the Cartoonist Kayfabe channel and keep things rocking in 2024. Give them those marching orders, Jimmy, and we'll be on our way.
Read more comics.
Boom. There it is, guys. I'm going to be connecting with Mike Allred pretty soon.
Yeah, I think it'll be good to talk to him.
Oh, it'll be super cool. Got some good stories, some good interactions in the past with the man.
Yeah, I was gonna say he's a good talker.
Is he? Because I don't.
You know what? I actually don't know on like an interview. I only know from like running into him. Mm-hmm. But he's very personable whenever you run into him. So I expect it to carry over here. And all the stories I've heard about people who have gone up to him and talked like craft and stuff, he's usually good for that too. So yeah, it's a lot of ground to cover, man. He's had a hell of a career.
Heck yeah, man.
done a little bit of everything. Maybe done a lot of everything at this point.
Gonna have to play the hits a little bit. Like I'm gonna need on the record because like I didn't read it. I've never read a million Mike Allred interviews, so I want to know. I want to know what it's like to be the kind of like odd man out kind of character, or like the one of these is not like the other characters in the Legend imprint.
Yeah, Legend. I have some questions about that.
Like what's that like, and how do you get like inducted into that? And I feel like, dude, if you got inducted to something like that, your game would immediately step up. You know what I mean? Like it's almost like we should put our minds in that perspective, like we're in some like anointed hierarchy or some shit to just improve faster or something. Because like that's a lot of talent to kind of match up against.
Yeah, I'm very curious about that. That'll be a good one. When he took over X-Force,
Yeah.
dude, the letter columns were like, I got the pitchforks and the torches. Let's go find this dude. They were not happy with that. And I wonder about that too, you know? Like, that's a weird thing. You know, that book made noise whenever he took over.
It did. It was getting a lot of promo.
You know how it works.
Big posters.
The stuff that makes noise, it's negative.
Right.
So I wonder about it, because he was on that for like 30 issues. It was a big run between that and Ecstatics. You know, like that was a big piece. So I think that'll be fun. But even just that transition, like I said, he was a guy that was alternative when you were one or the other.
Right, it's true. I was supporting like the AAA pop stuff when he was self-publishing.
That's cool, and that's after like Dark Horse had done Madman and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Like he was getting mad promo and stuff because like I was pretty ignorant. I was not looking at websites, and I was just getting like comic shop news and all that kind of shit. And he would get the cover to comic shop news for the Atomics.
Yeah, he was also early on at Oni Press.
My phone.
And connected to Kevin Smith. Like, he's a guy that seemed to get a lot of promo for not really being... Didn't seem like he loved to be in the spotlight.
Right.
But, man, his stuff certainly generated a lot of stuff. Yeah, he should be good. Like, his experiences might be as broad as anybody I can think of. I'm interested to even talk craft a little bit too. Like, I wonder if he does layouts. To write as much of his own stuff as he does, and then to work with writers as much as he does. Can't think of anybody else that really does that.
Right. Yeah, it's a very singular career.
Yes.
Not,
good word for it. Yeah.
Not many other kind of careers like that. And then didn't he have... Wasn't J-Bone coloring his shit?
Maybe.
That Spaceman book? Where
that sounds right.
Where it's like they're doing animated style background, where it's like the black line is for the characters and then like color lines for the backgrounds and stuff. And I think they were doing it like animation cell stuff.
Yeah, that's true. Or at least I remember that.
Yeah.
Yeah, very prolific too. Does not take much time off, which is kind of funny because like he's done music, he's made movies. You know, it seems like he'd be a guy that would be floating kind of in and out. Doesn't really. You look at his bibliography, and man, he's got a lot of stuff going on all the time. Comic stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it'll be fun to talk to him.
For sure.
This should be a normal week for me now, finally, after like weeks of holidays that stretch back to probably pre-Japan.
Yeah.
Because then it was Thanksgiving, then I was sick, then it was Christmas, then it was New Year's.
I feel
I'm looking forward to like, I have nothing now until like May on the calendar in terms of like a disruption or trips or anything.
Are you going somewhere in May? Because I think I might go.
I'm going to Utah.
Yeah, I think I'm going. I think I'll do Japan, either April or May. All of my Japan people are good. Me and Jeff were doing an accounting because there's a big earthquake on New Year's, and we did a big accounting of everybody, and you know he's checking in and I'm checking in, and it's like, all right, Jeff, this one's cool, that one's cool.
It's good.
So everybody's good. It happened on the West, and you know you think about it, dude. Now, obviously there was a terrible earthquake in Tokyo, but generally speaking, man, when you have skyscrapers and such a robust area, you could imagine that it stood the test of time, you know?
When we were there, I remember we watched video, and it was from inside of a building whenever there was an earthquake.
Yeah.
And they designed the more recent buildings for that, and they were showing like how much the building moved.
Oh yeah.
Unbelievable.
So check this out, man. When I was there in May, we all just got our own rooms, and those like real shitty, like those super tiny rooms, and my room was on floor 2, so you can imagine there's not much sway to it. But like upstairs, like floor 12, like they're hiding under the beds and waiting for the apocalypse to happen because there was an earthquake that I slept through. I was in an earthquake, but I can't tell you anything about it because also I was sick, so I like slept through. I just woke up to a million texts plus alerts and stuff like that.
It'd be kind of alarming.
It was like the end of the world type shit because like Brian is like he won't go on roller coasters and stuff. Like he's kind of a chicken dude, so he's he's going nuts. My girl's going nuts, and I'm just waking up to that shit, and I'm like, really? Like that really happened? Because like they were talking about like it was the end of the world, and I didn't even get jostled awake. And it was that, it's like I'm at the base of the fucking building.
Right.
Well, everything up top is going like this.
That's unbelievable. It's crazy to think you can build a building like that can really like shift.
Yeah,
and be
like
flex back and forth.
You see those bridges do that. And it feels like cartoons. It's
bridges
like
are
Fleischer Studio shit.
They have to, like they would break if they didn't do that flex. And we went under that bridge at New River Gorge, and they had like almost like gears. And as it expands, the two pieces are like locked gears together, but they roll. So the bridge is literally moving, on top of like the foundation, and they track that, like you can watch, and it moves a lot more than you might think it would move.
There are times like when you go down to the waterfront, and if you go onto the on-ramp to get on the bridge to like go wherever you're going, but you're stopped as the traffic is going, you feel yourself kind of going like this and shit.
Yeah, definitely.
Just like stopped. It's pretty unnerving.
That's not even that big of a bridge when you think of like some of these huge bridges that are around.
It's not high. Yeah.
That's it's very true. Yeah, I've noticed that sitting on bridges.
But then it is Pittsburgh, and it's like I just think of all the sinkholes and like all the bad stuff and it's like I hope this bridge stays up. Like that would be such a punk way to die, is to just like be stopped on a bridge and have no agency over anything, and it just fucking. But we got buses falling into the sidewalk, into the asphalt and shit.
Yeah, no doubt about it. The weird thing, I told Ed, I don't think I mentioned it on anything that we've been streaming, but I'm reading First Blood now, based on his recommendation. Some other people recommended it.
I re-listened to it before going out to Japan.
Oh, nice. It's fresh in here.
It is.
It's so weird to like read this stuff where I have like a clear idea of it from seeing the movie 1,000 times or whatever. And it always makes me think, like, how do you get into this if you read it, and that was it? If you read it in 1972, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like, it's such a strange way that colors, like, the perception.
Yeah, like, it definitely has hooks to it. Like, because, like, I feel like those, like, destroyers and shit like that would probably be out then. So it's like, there still is a male readership.
Right.
Which there
the paperback
isn't.
male reader.
Yeah, that just doesn't exist. And it's probably, like, the Green Beret, like maybe there was like the John Wayne thing or something like that, but it was like just barely in the so like that's an interesting hook, that it's like this Green Beret, because like as soon as they like go, oh, he's a Green Beret, like that becomes like the dominating, like, oh my goodness. But I mean, I don't know how you can't read it and not like talk about it, because it's so, it's got two speeds, like when it's, did you read it all?
I'm about halfway through.
So it's you see it already, where like it's like an escape story when it's John Rambo, and then it's fucking Freddy Krueger or Jason Voorhees when you're following the cops and shit. They're popping their heads up over the grass and they're just getting their heads blown off and stuff. It's scary.
It's really smart, like the way it's written, with each chapter switching between like cop and Rambo. That's pretty neat. That's a fun idea, and I think it was his first book.
I think so too. It's
such a cool idea, and I just wonder, like, when something becomes a phenomenon like that, because that book was successful before the movie,
You're right.
It probably, not the
Of
levels
course,
that,
of
of course, the
course, yeah.
movie propelled it to, but it was successful in a time whenever, look, most books, you hear they don't sell 1,000 copies, nobody ever hears about them. That book crossed that barrier and was heard of, and probably went through some printings and stuff. And I just always wonder, okay, how do you do it? Because there's lots of ways that books will work, right? Like there's books where it's like this is a roller coaster, like the language, just reading it is pleasurable. And I wouldn't say that's what this book is. There's no problem with it. It's not like it's written in some obtuse way where it's like, I got to reread
not
everything.
Even close.
No, it's very readable that way. But you're not reading it because beautiful prose.
Right.
That shifting of the two main character point of views, I think, is really clever.
You know what else it is, dude? I mean, you can't knock the zeitgeist. Like
Yes.
Vietnam is so
Yeah.
fresh, and all this baby killer stuff, and then probably let's get some sympathy for these guys that you're spitting on who are coming back, who are PTSD. It's there's been 3 generations in your family of PTSD from World War
Yes.
One, World War Two, and now your brother is coming back, and you're noticing how he's changed from when he left and stuff like that. So it's the zeitgeist stuff.
I think you can argue that main cop has it from Korea,
Right,
because he
yes.
talks about almost romantically, whenever he first comes back and he's restoring this cabin and not living like a savage, but when he starts hunting Rambo, he's reinvigorated.
Right.
It's almost Dark Knight. You can imagine Frank Miller pulling those ideas for Bruce Wayne, I'm a young man reborn, and it feels like that's an expression of PTSD, where it's now this dude's at home, where he's reliving his Korean War experience, that he was a decorated veteran.
Right.
Yeah, it's there's some good stuff in it. The generational stuff, though, the copy I'm reading must have been a later copy, because it has some intro from the author,
Mm-hmm.
and he talks about the generational divide, exactly what you're saying, with the Vietnam, plus people putting down those riots and things, and talking about how divided the nation is in 1972 when he's reading it, and all this stuff. I've said it 1,000 times. This stuff where it's oh, this is the same story,
Right.
decades later, and I never know if that's reassuring, hey, the more things change, the more they stay the
humanity,
same,
man.
or is it frustrating that show me something that we've developed,
Yeah, it just.
from 50 years ago.
Well, how about this, man? We got something, but the Vietnam stuff, the sort of, it's so fascinating because the draft existed. So you didn't have a choice.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly, if you were an economic stratum like us, but you didn't want to go, and people started to have their own kind of thoughts, and to bristle again, Nixon and all that stuff. So I know a lot of people, who even went to Desert Storm and stuff, who had a rebellious streak when they came back. So
Yeah.
my homeboy HB's dad, when he came back, was not, you can't wear denim and shit out there. He had a dress code at work, and it was very specific, but you weren't supposed to wear jeans. It had to be some kind of suit or something. He got a suit made of denim, like a dick. And my one homeboy Ed, he was in Desert Storm, and the rules with the hair, it wasn't that you don't have to buzz your head. It has to be so long, it can only be so something like that. So he got a super tight perm that was tight to the head, so that whenever they would go to Thailand and go off base and shit, he would pick that shit out and be the only military dude with a big cool afro and shit, and he'd get all the chicks.
That's great. That's the kind of detail to save for a character,
He's-
because that's a really good.
He's the one dude too that was when these fucking drill sergeants are yelling at I was laughing in their faces, man. That was silly to me.
That's a heck of a detail. It's interesting when you start telling that story. I'm okay, not conforming in whatever way. Representation is something else, right? Daddy issues, who knows? But then when you hear the practical side of it,
Yeah, mad.
it's almost
it's peacocking.
the unplanned, benefits or consequences, or if you will. Yeah, that's good. It'd be a really good character detail on something.
Yeah, it's definitely a piece. I never forgot about the dude.
But yeah, I'm enjoying the book. It's fun. I also got hold of Brave New World. I've been wanting to read that for a while. I haven't started that yet, but it's kind of on my list. And I grabbed some short story, a couple of short story collections.
Yeah, I've been hitting the I've been going through Saturday Night Lives as I work, because that's my thing, is strip a day. That's why we're just gonna have this. Yesterday was an anomaly. I just had too much anxiety about this shit.
What
But,
are your usual hours, like your sleep hours now?
Well, I got to get a strip done. So like I'm not staying up into the AM, but it's like 11 or something. But it's what's more important is that I just don't set an alarm.
Yeah.
You know, like I'll set an alarm for like 9 for Kayfabe. But I need to just be able to sleep because I get up in the middle of the night and I don't get back to sleep right away. So I have to still get my
old man schedule.
I just have to get my hours, man. So like that's just what it is.
I visited, I think, every relative I have over this past month somehow. Like people I haven't seen in a couple years. And an old uncle, they're all old too almost. And he was telling me about, he wakes up in the middle of the night, has a cup of coffee. I'm like, decaf? It's like, no, not decaf. And he goes back to sleep. Like, how does this work? I'm at that point where like I kind of about 4 o'clock is it, or else I'm not sleeping right.
Right.
Like I'll sleep, but it won't be when I first lay down. And then like the idea like I'm gonna take coffee in the middle of the night seems like a terrible idea, and it's like he's just the schedule.
It's amazing, man.
Yeah.
You know what was great in Tokyo, because they have those baths that are like tubs that are like this deep in your hotel and stuff, was like, because I was just jet lagged like the whole time. Like I did not get a full night's sleep probably any of those nights, but like you wake up at 2 a.m. and just like go into a super hot bath, and it's almost like you could just like fall asleep like right in there. And the tub isn't like long enough that you're gonna like go under, but like it's so calming, dude. It's like being swaddled or some shit.
Yeah, I usually do showers early because like I'll work out in the morning and then you got to shower.
Of course.
But the days where it can be a shower at night, like I don't know if you're working or something, physical especially, man, that's such a good relaxer for. Like,
I do both. Like I shower 2 times a day. Like I just can't go in that bed nasty.
Yeah.
I like to be clean always.
How dirty do you get though? You know, you're not out digging a ditch.
Yeah, it's just like nut sweat and stuff like that. You know, underarms. I don't know about you, but I got some hair on my underarms. That shit gets sweaty over time. The things that the King Kayfabers are privy to, huh?
This is a real behind the scenes. We haven't done one of these in a while.
Oh, but you know what? With the Saturday Night Lives, what I realize is that it's the perfect thing to kind of keep on in the background doing a daily strip, because like a strip is sketch comedy, you know, and like the whole idea is like maybe you get one right, you know, you want to get more base hits than strikeouts and shit, and I think, you know, that's the daily strip. It's like it's sketch comic making.
That's real interesting. I've never heard anybody lay that out. That's good.
It sort of naturally kind of came to my mind in that way, man, because it's like got to do one a day, and it's like they got to make a show a week, and you know it's Saturday every week. Yeah. So my thing is like strip a day.
I always love the Lorne Michaels quote about it's not when it's ready, it's when it's Saturday night.
That schedule, like I rewatched that documentary, and just it really is this. It's probably the closest like real world working environment that is like a Aaron Sorkin show, where like everybody is type A and at the top of their game and like kicking ass, you know, which makes sense. He did that one called Studio 30,
yeah,
which is great. I recommend it.
I need to track that down.
It's real sweet, and the only like that's one of those ones. Studio 30 and then
30 Rock.
30 Rock. It's called Studio 60, and 30 Rock were the same season. That was the same season on 2 different channels. But they said that Studio 60, it was just too expensive. And you know what's fucked up is that Matthew Perry dude is like a writer, and he's a like a, you know, they're playing on his like drug addiction shit in there, man. So it's like it's got this extra eerie tone now. But there's somebody out there, and I don't know if he's a King Kayfaber, but there's somebody out there who was like, oh man, you guys got me back into doing comics, and he works in animation, so the comics are real accomplished, like real good drawing. And he's making a comic called Sorkin-esque, and it's like a Dan Klaus Wilson fucking Aaron Sorkin series of comic strips, and like Sorkin is a dark fucking dude. Like when we were telling the New York story about like those documentaries around St. Mark's Hotel where those Wolf of Wall Street guys fucking crackheads, like he got caught with smoking crack cocaine, man, crack.
Yeah,
you know, and he's also a Broadway playwright, so like he's got like a fucking foot in darkness.
And it's bad whenever you have those kind of vices and you're successful, Because then it's just like, whatever you want, man, it's right. It's coming to you.
But like the cracks though, because like that's the cliche with like Keith Richards, right? But like there is like the cleanest heroin that you could buy, but like I don't think there's the cleanest crack, because like in order to get crack, it requires impurities. You know what I mean? Because that's baking soda and that's like the shit to rock it up.
Yeah.
So like you're getting foul shit, and it's not like, and it's Aaron Sorkin. It's like Argyle sweatshirt with a button with a colored shirt underneath, kind of motherfucker with the circle chip kid glasses, going to score some crack.
You know, you think about the parallels with like wrestling TV and SNL, because I mean that's another one where you're doing a lot of times live TV, and
right.
It's like, figure it out this week what we're gonna do, and then a bunch of performers. Like I never think of those two as being sort of like a lot of parallels between those two.
Totally, and you know, just that conversation with McFarlane about like, okay man, like, so you got some shit to do today, you better figure it out in your composition how you're going to get that strip done. You know, figure it out in your composition. Maybe you're gonna need an extra close up. Maybe you need those Kirby eyes.
Yeah.
Big Kirby face in the panel. But I realize like I don't have almost no talking heads, dude. It's all acting. And I think it's important actually to do that, because there's so much of that in mainstream comics and stuff. And it's like, nah, dude, like you got to have some business in your panels. You got to have
It's
some
so
shit
funny
happening.
because like all the stuff I would read, like the how-tos when I was a kid, it was always have those characters doing something.
And it was so rare. 'Cause that's literally why, like Harry Lucy stands out to Jaime and them, because they actually made good on that.
Yeah, and the stuff that I've heard them talk about, it's not even just your main characters. Like it'll be the background dude that's like playing fetch with his dog across three different panels.
Totally.
Yeah, it's a really good note, and it makes perfect sense. And probably, I bet if you were like studying acting or something, you would get a similar note. Like how often is somebody just standing still, delivering their dialogue?
Right.
But also probably not something that it's probably something that people go way too far on too. You always see like people that joke about being extras, and like there'll be extras that are just like still.
Dude, there's that famous guy that's like doing this shit. You know what I'm talking about? He's like doing this shit with the little coat on and stuff. Looks like a Mentos commercial. And he's got like a big smile and he's like mugging for the camera. Whenever I would do extra stuff, there would always be those guys, dude, that would always try to be like in the front row. And you know, you would get, as a courtesy, you get invited to the premieres and stuff. And I would go to the premieres, and it's like, they always fuzz you out. Like, you're never, like, visible, but, like, these dudes would be so extra, like, in the fucking thing, and, like, even go so far as to, like, push people out of the way to, like, try to get, like, their face in the thing. And it's like, you're just getting fuzzed out anyhow.
I wonder how many people who become successful actors have a period of being extras. Like, is that a thing, or is it like you just can't even do extra work if you're really?
Well, here's what I will say is that I know a chunk of dudes from like the Warrior movie set got their SAG card.
Wow.
From that, because they're as they were working out scenes and stuff, they had to say something. And then it's like you just get two of those. So like if they had some other speaking thing anywhere else, and then they have to say something there, like that's the credentials to get the SAG card.
Wow. And
that was something that had to be like negotiated, because like once those dudes got to that place, now instead of $100 a day, they got to get $700 a day. And it you know, it becomes a whole thing. So that's a route, but it's not ideal, certainly. Dana Carvey was talking about on the podcast, there was a show called Blue Thunder, like an Airwolf.
Oh yeah, I had the Blue Thunder helicopter. It was badass.
Okay, so dude, he is in Blue Thunder, but he's just like a dude in the back that like might have like a snide comment here or there. So he got fired off of it, but like he's like a little skinny guy. He's in Blue Thunder.
Wow. Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen a second of that movie, but the toy was really cool. Dude, I had to buy some kid toys this holiday season. I saw a Gravedigger remote control car that the footprint would be bigger than this backdrop.
Yeah.
It was giant. It was the biggest one, you know, because there's like the whole shelf of all the remote control cars, and it was like twice. It could have monster trucked any of those things, like real life driving over them. And it was like $80, and it was just, I kind of wanted it for myself.
because they don't make toys for kids anymore. Like when you
That thing was amazing.
when you go to the toy aisle, it's like Thundercat toys and Masters of the Universe figures and GI Joes. It's all our shit. Like little kids don't play toys. They play like Roblox and Minecraft and tablet stuff.
Yeah.
Like, but all the figures.
That's so weird to think of. Like
It's
even
all our
toys
shit.
aren't for kids. It's just replaced with
And it's dudes our age. That's why dude,
apps.
I just like we're gonna be okay, man. Because people our age bracket, they got that disposable income, and I and it's just gonna keep going. Like it's
You know what? I did
it's
have
gonna
this
keep growing
this,
with
this
us.
thought. Oh man, I'm glad you said it, 'cause I've been wanting to say this. I realized like we should not, and I don't mean us, but people in general should not take for granted comic readers in the sense that a lot of people don't read. Period.
Right.
And you know, if you're that, then you're out. And then like to further go, like, well, read this thing that has pictures in it. It's such a the barrier to there's an entry that I think keeps people out in comics now that did not exist in the past, because in the past when they were a thrift drug or whatever drugstore or corner store, at some point in your age, like you brushed against a comic book. You might not have liked it, you might not even read it, but they were kind of there.
Right.
And now like you can really live and never have that like, oh yeah, I brushed up against these graphic novels or whatever, in a way that like it kind of sobered me up about it, just in a sense that all the online chatter about what's working or isn't working or this or that, but I do think like you can't take for granted that everybody's a comic book's going to pass through their hands, and then maybe we keep them, or maybe they come back, or maybe they're open to it. I think a lot of people, it's like, didn't even know this existed.
Oh no, totally. Like I've had drivers pick me up. Oh, what are you doing, man? Oh, I'm going to this like book festival, comic book festival. Oh, they still make those?
I've gotten that one.
I've heard that before. But like the reason why you have that chatter online is because it is such a rarefied thing that you got to make the work fucking rock. Like so don't put dog shit in somebody's fucking hand that'll turn them off. I mean that's why I totally abhor those bad jobber comics, man. Because it's like you're fucking somebody up. If every comic is somebody's first comic, why would they read a second one after reading your piece of shit? And like I don't care. Like you can say anything you want about my shit. I know me, and I know I at least fucking try my fucking damnedest on every single thing I do. And nobody can take that away from me. Like I know that I'm busting my ass on all my stuff and trying my best. And you read that stuff and you just know that they're not.
Yeah.
You just know that they're not, man.
It's funny because the flip side is how ubiquitous the comics language is. Like memes, all this stuff is still built on that same kind of language.
Yeah.
And people do encounter that part.
I think people would be totally receptive. It's expensive. That's a hard thing to wrap your head around. Those Atomics comics, I totally remember this, man, because I was still working at the call center while when those were fresh out, and that was on my pull list, and they were maybe $5, $4.99, because they were full color, web press maybe. They might have been $4.99.
I think they were web press in a time when most comics weren't printed that way anymore.
Yeah, and my boss was like talking shit on that. Why would you pay that much money for that stuff? And I'm like, motherfucker, you get like a Red Bull and vodka for lunch every day, and it's more than this. Fuck you. Like we would get into like bickering matches. I also wished cancer on him, and then he got cancer and died. And I'm like, I forgot I'm a gypsy. Like you can't. I gotta be careful with my spells and shit.
That's another thing in that new Fargo. I think there's a dude that's like a skinwalker. It's kind of wild.
What's a skinwalker?
It's like a human. They would usually be in shamans, like Native American lore.
Okay, I know what that is, man. I know what that is. Where they like get into you and
Well, they can take forms of like animals.
Right. That's in Alpha Flight comics.
Yeah, there you go.
The John Byrne Alpha
There'd be
Flights.
stories of like the creatures running alongside a car would be like an encounter that you might read about.
Right.
But he might be more of a witch or a warlock or something. But it was kind of interesting because it's like badass cops, bad actor cops, hitmen. It's almost like this meat grinder of like all the stuff that you could possibly get in there, and then throw in the supernatural, killer type dude too.
Right.
Like just everybody's in there.
That's that magical realism shit. You have a piece of that in there.
Oh shit! You know what, guys? I think we got to wrap up.
Yeah, we'll tear down because you and I got a bit of business.
We do, yeah.
Ahead of time. And
Fun talking though, man. Hope,
Yeah, for
hope
sure.
all you guys are doing good. Hope you have some good plans for 2024 and get it going, man.
Be
It's a good
here.
time to put on some new practices.
Be here next Thursday and the next Thursday after that. We got some good shit going on. And I'm on the Allred edits, so that'll be the first video I edit for you guys. Take care.